Welcome back, Flyers nitty-gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Wolok, my partner in crime, as always, back from Vegas. Vasili, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing really well coming back from Vegas. Obviously, a very interesting draft, not just from a Flyers perspective, but from the whole NHL, and then really busy opening free agency day. So there's a ton for us to get into, a ton for us to analyze, and it's going to be a really, really fun episode.
Yeah, dude, we were pumped. And obviously, we promised you all we would have Steve back on the show to recap what the Flyers have done. You had the pre-show, the draft analyst himself, Steve Kournianos. Welcome back to the show, buddy.
Can't wait. I can't wait, man. This is always like, I get excited for the pre, but the post is always a lot more fun.
Yes.
Because you're tying free agency and all the stuff going on, and there's no more rumors. We have finality, so looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I think it's also good for Flyers to know who they want to know about, right? Like, we're asking you general questions. We're learning about all these guys that we don't even get ownership over in any kind of capacity. And now, we personally have players we're more invested in, right?
Sure.
Even though I do love learning about all the players prior to the draft. There is something awesome about it. And then kind of watching them.
There's a lot of them. There's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Like 1,000 plus.
Yeah. And I did ask Steve to give us a little preview into next year's draft, and we'll talk about why that's important. So, yeah, there's a lot to talk about. Let me get the sponsor stuff out of the way so we can get started. So just want to remind everybody, please like, subscribe, share this out if you can. Hit the notification bell for notifications on YouTube. Again, our subscriptions have definitely gone up, so thank you all so much. If you're listening and you have not subscribed, please do that right now. Also, follow us on iTunes and Spotify. Give us a rating there if you can. Those have gone up as well. Thank you all so much. You guys are awesome. Also, shout out to our sponsor, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's. It's summertime. Go to South Street. Go get yourself a cheesesteak. And also, shout out to Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for all your insurance adjustment needs. Again, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And also want to remind everybody that we have now a brand new partnership with Sports Spider. Just want to give a brief shout out to our new partner. I have to read this brief that I just struggle so much reading through it. Just want to give a shout out to our new partner, Sports Spider. Guys, if you're tired of searching multiple websites for sports news, sportspider.com has you covered. They collect the latest articles, videos, and podcasts from around the web and organize them by your favorite teams. If you want to stay up to date as possible on your Philadelphia Flyers and the NHL in general, hit the link in the description to check out Sports Spider. Again, it's in the description of this video and also the audio version if you're listening on audio. All right, let's get into it. This is a big moment for Flyers fans. Free agency opened up, and the big signing that we kind of knew was going to happen. We were already told by Danny Briere not to expect much in this free agency, and there are plenty of reasons for that, and we can dig into that a little bit as well. But Matvei Michkov has officially signed his ELC. Development camp has kicked off. He is not here, as we know so far, unless they're hiding him somewhere in the United States. But as of right now, we assume he's still in Russia. But he did sign officially with the Philadelphia Flyers a 3-year standard entry-level contract, $925,000 in a base salary, and up to $3.5 million in bonuses. Typical top of the draft type of signing. Again, given a deal the way a first overall pick, second overall, third overall pick would get. Again, he is that caliber of player. And yeah, couldn't be more excited. Steve, I'll let you go first, and Vasili, you can go after. What are your thoughts when you saw the deal coming in, and what's the dollar amount signed? It seemed to you like you get the same vibe that I do?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's Bedard-esque, you know what I mean? And this kind of what it does is it, in a way, validates what we've been saying for about 2 years, is that he is on that kind of a level. And so although the buildup, it's not going to be much of a buildup because he's coming a lot sooner than we expected, which is a good thing. But listen, they bought out Atkinson, right? Well, the last time we convened, we talked about Atkinson and how I was like, buy him out, like move on. And the fact that the Flyers weren't all that active in free agency, that, they talk about the dead space and everything. Like they created additional dead space. And so we know for a fact that he's going to be in the NHL next season. There's going to be, I don't think there's going to be any Lehigh Valley. There's going to be none of that stuff. Briere even went as far as to say that even if he struggles or whatever, like Torts can do whatever he wants with him. Like he is a Flyer. He's going to probably see power play time. So it's like the Flyers are creating conditions to let him succeed. You know what I mean? And I think that they want him to hit the bonuses. They don't want him to, let's say, just have like, a middling kind of a rookie year. So that's the story of the offseason for the Flyers, without a doubt. We can't get too upset over, Washington being busy and Columbus making moves and the Flyers didn't address this or that. Like they brought Michkov over in less than a year, or in one year, and the power play is going to now feature him. Well, not necessarily feature, we don't know that, but he's going to see power play time because Briere said that in the press conference. So it is a huge win. Forget about the draft, forget anything else. Like Michkov's a Flyer. He's going to be in training camp. I guess they're saying he's got to deal with his immigration stuff and all those administrative odds and ends. But yeah, I mean, the dollars make sense. And remember, the dead space that's really constraining and limiting the Flyers' ability to be players is just short term. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then you're going to want to when Forster and let's say Drysdale or Urson, when they need bridge deals or when they need their pre-UFA, their big deals into UFA, you want to have plenty of space for that, and they will. So I like the moves they made. It's almost like they're happy with the current state of affairs, and Michkov is going to be I don't want to say a central figure to everything that goes on this season, but the fact that he's going to be there and we're going to see him, and through good and bad, like it's going to be an accelerated step to have him in the lineup. And I'm just excited for him to be playing in the NHL. We thought it was going to be 3 years. It was only one. So
it's awesome. So
yeah, it's really the best case scenario from the Flyers when you take into consideration what happened at last year's draft, right? Michkov falls for the reason that teams aren't really sure if he'll be able to come over. And he comes over essentially within a year, and the Flyers are able to navigate that. According to Ska and the outlets out of Russia, there was no money transaction involved. I mean, who really knows what's happening behind the scenes on that? I mean, but it's definitely an interesting tidbit that I wanted to mention. Just to go over the deal again here, all 3 years include an NHL salary of $855,000, a signing bonus of $95K, which brings the cap into $950,000 a season. There's also an A performance bonus of $1 million every season, a B performance bonus of $2.3 million. That puts the average annual value potentially of the contract at $4.25 million. So to Steve's point here, right? Like it's pretty close to the Bedard echelon where Bedard's AAV on his contract's $4.45 million.
That's what it says on Cap Friendly. Maybe that's different. I'm sorry to cut you off, but
yeah. So Puckpedia.
Okay.
But yeah. So Bedard's AAV is 4.45 million, and then the performance bonuses for him are 3.5 million, where Michkov's are 3.3. So close to Bedard, and it kind of shows you the echelon that the Flyers are really holding Michkov to here. The interesting thing for me about all of this is really just, if you look at what the Flyers have done and you look what's happening this offseason, they're not really making a ton of moves. They're not really looking to change things up or really shake things up. It's really the central focus has been Michkov, and that's kind of their big free agent signing. At least that's my opinion of it. And in terms of Briere and the opportunities that Michkov's going to get, I think he's going to really get ample opportunity to show off his skill, especially on the power play. Like they've had the worst power play in the league for the last 3 seasons. So you can only imagine how much life his skill set's going to inject into that. And also just to wrap up, I mean, you see Flyers fans kind of wondering, okay, why isn't the team making moves? Why isn't the team doing this? Why isn't the team doing that? And I think Briere essentially said, right, they're not looking to make short-term moves for the sake of making moves. And that was kind of a staple of the Chuck Fletcher regime, I would say. It seems like they have a plan in place and they're trying to follow the plan. Like in the post press conference to Michkov signing, Briere stated that, you know, it's not going to take 1 or 2 years. They're in the rebuilding phase. They don't want to build this team to make the playoffs. They want to build this team to be a contender on a yearly basis. So
that's the right answer.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
it looks like they're sticking to their plan and they're not deviating from that just because Michkov's coming over. I think that's a good thing to see, right? Because you don't want them to see making outrageous, outlandish moves just because you're getting one, you know, extremely talented player. You have to do it the right way. You want to build a core of very talented young players around him so they can kind of build that competitive team for years to come, not just for, you know, a season or two and then fall off.
Yeah, no, I think that's very well stated. And you're right. They updated the numbers on Cap Friendly as well. And we only have it for a couple more days, but looks like it was initially came in as 4.45, and then I assume they adjusted it to the actual number. So thank you for even correcting me on that. So it's awesome. Yeah, you guys both bring up excellent points. And I think this is why I want to talk about next year's draft. I brought this up to people on here. I've been bringing it up to people on Twitter. I had some people like get mad at me for saying this. I go, if you look at the financials and you look at the draft plan, their plan is pretty exposed. If you listen to what they're saying, they are saying that with consistency about waiting, but their timeline is exposed in their financials. It's just like politics. Follow the money, you know, and look at how they're allocating their budget. And if they have these buyouts, right, if they have all this large, they have the second highest amount of dead cap space in the league outside of Minnesota. Right? And we know why Minnesota is so high. The Flyers were willing to do this on a very short-term basis, like you said, Steve, where by the end of next season, it should all be gone. Yeah. And that seems to be their actual timeline. People keep saying, oh, they're going to be good in 5 years, and all. It's irrelevant. They're opening up their window, and we'll see how good they are when that window opens up. So yeah, I am over the moon about Michkov, and I really like what you were saying about, you know, how they kind of labeled that he's on this team. I think they kind of know, right? Like giving him that money, they know what he is, right? Like they know what this kid is. Is everything always go 100% smoothly? No. But if you look at the success that Bedard had, or even Carlson and Fantilli, yeah, are their games 100% perfect? Like Bedard's defensive game is not necessarily like, you know, NHL ready, but it's what they bring in that element that they have, that elite element. And I think for sure, Steve, he's gonna be playing on the power play. I mean, we had by far the worst power play in the league, and it was the worst power play in the league for 3 years in a row.
Yeah,
it cannot be any worse. Putting Michkov on it can only be better than what they had. So 100%. And you know, we talked about this a little bit before recording. I want to bring it up here again because it's been a big topic on the internet, and for some reason, like. And I do criticize Flyers fans for doing this because they're buying into this. But, you know, the Habs have not really gotten over, at least the fans have not really gotten over passing on Michkov and taking David Reinbacher, who, you know, in himself is going to be a pretty good defenseman. I assume from what I've seen so far. He had a short stint in the AHL, put up some numbers. Like, he's not a bad prospect, right? But there's kind of this like poking from the Habs fan base. And now that they took Demidov, and we'll go deeper on the draft, there seems to be this like huge like response to compare that Michkov is better than Demidov. Look, this is what I think. I'd rather take the prospect who's been playing against men longer, who showed success against men. Great. You know, I'm very high on Michkov. Do I believe Michkov will be better than Demidov? Yeah, I think there's probably a chance of that, but we don't really know. We have no idea. But I will say this, there's no way Demidov is not an awesome prospect and is going to be a top tier player in the league. Every single thing points to it. So I'm seeing this whole battle of like trying to diminish, you know, Demidov, you know, from Flyers fans, and then Habs fans trying to diminish Michkov. And it just completely senseless. First of all, they have different playing styles to begin with, and they both seem like amazing prospects that either team would be thrilled to have. So I don't understand this whole comparison battle that needs to arise now. And I guess you can add the Flyers passed up a guy. We'll talk about it a little bit later. And we have our own kind of trauma now that has nothing to do with Demidov, but it does seem like people kind of have this whole thing where like forever they will compare these two players that were in their mind supposed to be drafted at this position. And Steve, I'll open up to you first because you're our prospect guy. You know, what are your thoughts when you see something like that?
That's clickbait. It's just the way, you generate buzz and whatever. I mean, it's like every year when there's a draft, they always have to find like a 1A, right? They know Nico versus Nolan. And so, sometimes obviously in a year like with Bedard, there was a discussion that Michkov would challenge him. And I'm not going to reiterate or rehash that whole thing. But even like this year, at one point it was Yzerman and Celebrini, and that of course dissipated very quickly. So that's just part of the thing. The difference though is that they're in different draft classes. They weren't competitors. They both belong to the same organization. So I think that, Montreal is a different animal when it comes to covering hockey. I watched some of the press conferences with poor Jeff Gorton. And they're like, "Are you going to trade anybody?" Like, he's like, "I'm not going to tell you." So it's a different animal. It's always been like this. Going back to like Red Fisher calling out Jacques Lemaire, and like it's like a cutthroat. Listen, Philly, New York, it's kind of the same way. But when it comes to the draft prospect, they don't care about patience. They don't care. Oh, well, be patient. It's all about creating some kind of narrative that's going to generate buzz, interest. And divisiveness sells, unfortunately, and sports is no different than the general news landscape. Like if you divide, you're going to have people still be interested no matter what side they choose. And so, but my overall assessment is that Michkov is the superior prospect because his resume is superior, right? And that what he did in the MHL, it was similar to what Demidov did, but he did it 2 years before he was drafted, or a year and a half before he was drafted. So I think that the Montreal situation is different because I don't think they're going to try to bring him over, Demidov. I don't think they're going to try to bring him over right away because they have a loaded pool. They have all these kids in Laval who are ready to take the next step. And I think the fan base is like, can we start adding some pieces? Because the Habs have been improving every year. But I think they want to see them take a step like, let's say, Detroit did, or even Philly last year, where they're in the hunt. And the Canadians kind of were. So I think Demidov, what we have to prepare for is his astronomical, let's say, VHL or KHL numbers next season. They're going to compare that to Michkov. It's just natural because they're both Russian. They're both wingers. My advice to Flyers fans is just ignore it. Okay. Like, he's going to be a rival one day. There's going to be there's a chance that the Flyers and the Canadians, they used to be rivals back in the day too, conference finals, a couple of times. So I think that for now, just focus on Michkov, and that, if you want to observe Demidov from afar and his special talents, fine. But it's really, you could pick any McDavid, Matthews, or, right. McKinnon, or Pasternak, Panarin. Like, that's just what Makar, Heiskanen, or Hughes. Like, that's just what people do. I wouldn't take it like as an affront. If they start to marginalize Michkov, or Flyers fans marginalize Demidov, that's a little unhealthy and it's not fair. It's kind of like, it's just adding to the negativity that is kind of pervasive in sports media nowadays. So I would just focus on Michkov and what he can control. Demidov has nothing to do with it. And when they play against each other, it'll be fun. It'll be interesting.
Yeah. And it's Vasili, sorry, I'll let you talk in a second here. And just to add to that, like I heard Craig Button even do it, being like, "Oh, Ivan Demidov, he's superior to Michkov." I'm like, what? I'm like, what? What does that have anything to do with your prospect analysis? Why even bring Michkov up?
Well, it's a clickbait thing, right?
It's just basically like what we learned. Well, let's look at the Michkov. And I'm sorry I'll be quick. The thing about, remember how the Michkov thing snowballed, right? Last year, the negativity, it snowballed. Yeah. At first it was the contract, and then it snowballed into his character, his defensive game, and then everybody jumped in. It was mostly north of the border, and Vasili, of all people know that when it comes to stuff like this, you have to get behind the momentum and be in on it. And so there's always going to be a dissenting voice or two. Luckily, that's what we're for, why we're here. But I think them doing that for Michkov is just it's to create a side story to say, well, I'm not just into the Michkov, Demidov thing for their skill. I want to see who's better, and I want to pick sides and not like the other guy. And
Right.
I think that's unhealthy, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, it's a very like negative narrative to kind of put out there. Like for example, Michkov congratulated Demidov on his social media. Like they're obviously really good friends.
Yes.
So why would you
Yeah.
so why would like the media try to pit them against one another? Like they're never gonna not like each other or dislike each other. So it's really just media driven. It's to push a certain narrative. You know, whatever outlets are even publishing stories on stuff like this, it's kind of amateur hour in my opinion. Like
Yeah.
instead of publishing this type of story, pitting these two together, you should really be focusing on the kid that just got drafted because like Steve said, they're not even in the same draft class. So for even, you know, outlets to typically, you know, do like a Matthews versus McDavid or you know, certain prospects in the same draft class, like sure, I get that because they're in the same draft class, but to do it between two guys that aren't even in the same class, it's really just trying to create some negative narrative that doesn't really exist and really only exists between the fan bases. And it's likely because the Montreal fans, even though they're excited about getting Demidov, they still are pissed off about not being able to draft Michkov, unfortunately. So that's really what it is for me. And it is unfortunate that the positive can't be focused on that. Hey, look, we got this great prospect in Demidov. Let's be happy about that instead of kind of pushing this, you know, Michkov versus Demidov narrative. And it's the same thing from Flyers fans, right? Like, you know, the Flyers weren't really going to ever have a chance to draft Demidov in this particular draft. I mean, there was rumblings that they were trying to trade up. There's always rumors of that stuff. When have we last seen like a top 10, even top 5 pick get traded in the NHL draft? It's
2008.
yeah, very, very rare to your point, Steve. So it doesn't happen often. So I think it's just a media narrative trying to get pushed out there, unfortunately, for Demidov and unfortunately for Michkov. I mean, hopefully we don't see it continue, but knowing how the media is, they probably will.
Yeah. And Danny Briere even said that the offer that they had for Columbus for 4th overall wasn't even very serious. He like
Yeah.
kind of said, he's like, that wasn't even like close. He was just like,
Well,
he's like, we were just talking.
Say one thing before I forget, and I know that I brought up the Forsberg comparison in the past because of the waiting period and then the Lindros trade. The way that Lindros was treated by the Quebec media, right? Once he spurned them, I mean, baby Lindros, the return, throwing baby bottles at him. I mean, it was really bad. Not that Lindros wasn't somewhat complicit in it, but like that is what it is. So I'm not saying that, you know, when Michkov goes to Montreal for the first time,
Oh yeah,
he might
I
get
didn't think
booed
about
when he
that.
touches the
Yeah.
puck. The poor kid did not,
definitely expect that, I would say.
you know,
to be
and
honest.
maybe like a story will come out that we wanted to draft him, but he said no, or someone's gonna maybe lie and say sources said, and who the hell is the sources? So this is not going to go away, and they might again just tailor it so that it perpetuates well into the like middle and end of their careers.
You saw the did you see the Grant McCagg thing? We brought it up on the podcast last week.
No.
Vasili, you weren't on, but the Grant McCagg, do you know who he is? He's I guess he's like a scout out of
Former
Montreal.
scout.
Yeah, former scout out of Montreal. He essentially was on a podcast and he was saying how he hopes that Michkov doesn't do well in his first year because he doesn't want to hear about it online.
Like he's a kid.
That's not.
Oh my! It was a bad take.
That's not fair. Like I've that's the one thing I've learned in the beginning, and I'm not going to lie. Like when I first started covering prospects, when you have your favorites, it's almost felt like a natural inclination to
Right.
not like those who you weren't in favor of for whatever reason, and that you would argue with someone like, no, this prospect isn't as good. But then as I've been doing this now almost 10 years, you evolve and you're like, I like all these kids. I want all of them to succeed, even the ones for my rivals. You know, and so to openly root against a prospect,
It was weird.
me is that like a little like some projecting on his part? I don't know his deal.
It's definitely bias, right? Like
I'll send you the clip later.
he definitely was
don't
biased.
don't even bother.
Okay.
I trust you, you know, like, but you know, like again, this is if people want to get subscriptions and they want to sell a narrative and just generate buzz and click, like, you know, I'm proud of the fact that these discussions we have are really just honest and genuine. We don't try to like spin anything, and it's naturally growing the right way, where it's not like we have to lie or say that we have sources saying this or whatever. Like, it's just, just a bunch of hockey crazed fans who, so I get it. It's unfortunate. It's part of the reason why I quit the damn industry to join the damn army. It just says a lot about it. I mean, that's a true story. I was working for the Associated Press and I quit to join the army. And a lot of it had to do with, being in the locker room and being around that whole machine and apparatus. And I'm like, let me join the army. So anyway, like, it's I guess to tie the knot on this, like, Michkov, you have to just prepare for the negativity no matter what. Okay. If he scores 10 goals, oh, well, 8 were on the power play. If he has, 3 assists in 10 games, oh, they weren't primaries. You're going to get this. I don't know what kind of a level, but just be excited and really cancel it out. And again, I think a lot of it is projecting. It's a lot of people like, I wish we had him. We didn't get him. So let's marginalize his accomplishments. Yeah. And, that's not how I roll. And I'm obviously you guys as well. So,
yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate to me that, like, you were a former scout, potentially still does a lot of scouting work, and you're probably like 50, 60 years old and you're bashing 18-year-old kids. Like, it just doesn't seem like the right thing to do from a morality standpoint. Like, even if you didn't like his game,
whatever blows your head back, if it makes him happy, it makes him happy.
Well, what are you going to do, right? It's just like we said, it's a negative discourse. That's obviously just the fact that there's a bias there, and he can't own up to the prior bias. So
I'm excited for Demidov, though. Like, I'm looking forward to it.
I can't wait to watch him play for the Habs.
I don't care. I'm never going to compare the two because
they're different prospects, different people. So
there's going to be 500 wingers, 400 wingers in the NHL. Like, everybody's unique in their own right. So it seems kind of like, raining on someone's parade for the sake of creating like a narrative that will generate, I don't know, clicks, revenue, subscriptions. I don't know.
A lot of people talked about it, so I guess it worked from that perspective. But still a terrible opinion to have.
Not much revenue for the shit talking. All right, let's move forward. I'm sure Demidov is going to come up again. We'll talk about the draft in a little bit. So for those of you listening, we'll talk about the Flyers, the draft, and then we'll talk about next year's draft, and we'll talk a little bit about free agency to close it up. All right, so the next piece of news, you already mentioned it, Steve. There was speculation whether the Flyers would buy out Cam Atkinson's contract. Again, he had, I think, around $5.5 million, slightly more, left on his 1-year deal. They did opt to buy him out. It's like $2.5 million, a little bit more than that, like $2.6 million, something like that, against the cap this year, $1.7 million against the cap next year. He did decline a trade. He did have a partial no movement clause and did not want to move to the San Jose Sharks. So he had that opportunity. So the Flyers were kind of forced to buy him out. Again, when you look on paper, didn't really have a spot for him in the roster with guys like Bobby Brink making the jump. It was already going to be a tight squeeze and they needed the extra cap space. So, that was kind of done out of a position where, like, hey, Michkov is coming over. This guy's spot's gone at this point. And like you said, Steve, like, let's just cut the cord. Let's move on. And as of about a half hour before we started recording, Cam Atkinson did sign a 1-year deal with the Tampa Bay Lightning on a not a minimum, but he got a $900K contract, so almost minimum. Again, he is still getting paid. So, in his mind, he wants to go where he can compete. Tampa Bay made a bunch of changes, and, I would say good luck to Cam Atkinson. He's a good dude. I think everybody here likes him, including in the organization as well. I don't think anybody wanted to see him leave this way. But it's good that he found another job. Vasili, I'll go to you first on this. What are your thoughts about Cam?
I think for Atkinson, definitely writing on the wall. And if you look at the Flyers salary cap situation and Michkov coming over and, the chance of him hitting those bonuses, they did need to clear some cap space to kind of make it all work. So it really makes sense, at least from that perspective, why they bought him out. In terms of Atkinson, like you said, Yariv, like, he's a really, really great guy. Seems like a very, very nice person in general. So it always sucks when the hockey side and the business side comes into play. And, I'm sure he didn't want to get bought out, but he gets another chance with Tampa Bay, even to potentially, get back in the playoffs, maybe chase after a cup. Like, who knows how it's going to go there. But at least he gets that chance to bounce back and show that his career might not be over. And as a Flyer, I mean, like, he had a really good first season with the team, was really productive in terms of like shorthanded goals, his penalty killing prowess. So who knows, if he can get back to kind of that first season form that he had with the Flyers on Tampa Bay. Definitely a wait and see situation. But it can always be tough for a player, right? Because he almost missed a full year and then came back. So sometimes that can be tough to get back up to speed. So we'll see what happens. If he has any gas left in the tank, kind of to finish things off with Tampa here.
Yeah, it can bury the contract too, so it's an easy one for them. Steve?
I mean, they did really well without him last year. So that would be my strategy when I'm strategizing my off-season moves. I'm like, all right, like you analyze every player, the pluses and minuses, the contract, everything. Analytics comes in, they give their spiel, and that's it. But with Atkinson, like, the team did really well when he wasn't in the lineup. Not that it was because he was, let's say, a negative value. It's just that the progression going younger, and although I think Torts, he and Torts have a relationship, he is a good soldier. He's a bottom six guy. He could chip in offensively every now and again, but it makes it just more negotiable to buy someone like that out when you see results from whomever took his spot, right? Whether it be, you have young guys that filled in, the checking line that they formed was affected, and obviously they liked what Hathaway did. So again, this is one of those things where if he was a little bit healthier and was more productive, then you could say, all right, well, he's good in the locker room and he's productive. And we still think that even though we're not making moves, we might look how close we were to making that last wild card. We think we could do it again, regardless of what the other teams are doing in the offseason. But now, remember how I've said, hey, which way the fly is going? Like, now we know which way they're going. Okay. Like and we could get into the 2025 draft. This seems to be like, we don't care what happens next year. If we are 500 again and competing, fine, but we are doing this like deliberately. So it really is a really true rebuild, and that they have the luxury to pivot to a fire sale if things go like spiral out of control. Let's say by February, they could pivot. I mean, they have the dead space, but then they could also.
That's a good point.
They have quality veterans that teams would want. Guys like, let's say, Couturier or Lawton. I don't know what their contract status is.
Lawton's the big name that's been
the big name. All right. So the only thing is like the Konechny extension, where Briere said like it's just no news. But like when you say goodbye to a guy like Atkinson, you said goodbye to Kevin Hayes. You brought them in, I think, good intentions, right? You gave it a shot. It didn't work out. And then you move on. And so I'm not really, I was more confused about 2 weeks ago, but after watching the press conferences, and Briere seems like a genuine guy. Like, I don't think like when he lies, like GMs most lie, like he's not going to reveal secrets, but it's pretty obvious too that the only way that this would be different, I think, is if ownership stepped in and be like, hey, we've done our surveys. We've contacted season ticket holders. They want you to buy. I'm putting my foot down. I'm changing the plan. I want you to buy. So here's $30 million. Go spend it and whatever. That's happened before with other franchises. I don't think the Flyers are going to be in that position. I think it's like, hey, gut it little by little, deliberately, add pieces, draft capital, whatever. I mean, look, they traded down from the first round and traded a first round pick. That is not what teams who want to like win now do. Right. That's like, hey, we're accumulating. We want to be good in like, perennially, basically, 3-4 years down the road. So business as usual. We said, good guy. Like you said, Vasili, a two-way, 200-foot type. And that's it. That's it. He's old too. He's like 36, 37 almost.
Yeah, exactly. He's at the end of the career here.
Yeah. So he'll go to Tampa. It's a good spot for him. You wish him the best of luck. Guys like that seem pretty proud. Like, buyout is a little bit of a ding to the ego. It's just like getting laid off and getting a severance.
Yeah.
It's a business decision, but you feel like you're not good enough to be with them, and so you might see him, have a little bit of a rebirth or a renaissance, if you want to call it that. But for the Flyers, it made complete sense.
Yeah, I'd be happy for him if he did too. I think he earns that after battling back after missing an entire season of his end of his career. This is not on the topic list, but I did message Vasili about this. I was even like playing around with the Flyers roster and trying to get them under the cap without putting Ryan Ellis and Ryan Johansson on LTIR, just because there are penalties associated with it. It gets carried over to the next year, and Flyers aren't going to want to jump to use LTIR like people assume that they will. And I think the next guy is subject to some kind of diminishing role is Nicolas Deslauriers, who makes 1.75. He's got 2 years left on that contract. It's actually cheaper for the Flyers to just bury him in the minors than would be even to trade him at 50% retained. They only take a $600,000 cap hit. So I would look out for that guy as well, who is past 30. His role is diminishing.
But you got some young kids there.
That's the argument.
They're going to want to protect, right?
Exactly. But putting him through waivers doesn't remove him from the team, right? The whole thought is just to get him down and then inevitably called back up because, like you said, they're going to need his role in some capacity.
Listen, you got guys like Rempe running around. I think that, and I'm not, Alex, I'm an old school hockey fan. I love the 80s. I was too young for the Broad Street Bullies, but there is a role for that, and that is coming back and make hockey violent again. People could poo-poo that all they want. It's just reality,
it's
right?
Real. It's very.
You have
real.
to accept it. And guys like, let's say, Mitch Marner or finesse guys, deep down inside, they're probably like, yeah, it's good to have a guy like that could get my back. 100%. So yeah, like, I think the Flyers have flexibility. They really do. I mean, the dead space is annoying and definitely restricting, but it's short term. So yeah, like I think let's see how the first month and a half goes. Because if we see a repeat of last year, then we're gonna, you got to play. You got to, if you have that fourth line and Deslauriers is contributing, even if it's not necessarily producing, but he has a thing, then you might bite the bullet and say, all right, yeah, we could save money. But yeah, I agree that it's an option that they could enjoy. Well, and it goes back to them not being busy this offseason because they want to have those options.
Yeah. It just on paper, he's the 13th forward. That's the reason I say that. Does he have a role in the NHL? Yes.
So they're breaking up the Paling of Deslauriers.
Well, it turned into Noah Cates, Paling, and Hathaway, and they were very good as a bottom six unit. So it really depends on Bobby Brink. If Bobby Brink starts off in the NHL, which I suspect he will, Deslauriers 13th forward.
I assume, like you said, Yariv, like it could be a beginning of, maybe they're looking for a new home for him or trying to trade him or something like that. But I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe just use him as a 13th forward for a lot of the season. And then in those certain games where you're playing those heavier teams, and there's like a Rempe or, you're playing Minnesota who has a lot of fighters, things like that, then they put him in and drop him into the lineup, right?
Yeah. It depends on how much cap space. Again, I'm using cap friendly. And with Deslauriers in the minors, it gives them under or just about like 600K, maybe a little bit more, maybe close to 700K of cap space without using LTIR. So I can see them playing with that idea, but I don't disagree. And I think Torts really likes Deslauriers. I think he likes being able to put him in the lineup in those physically tough games, where Bobby Brink does not excel in those games. So I think he still has a role with the team, but that's another guy where, and you talk about a fire sale, that's a guy I could see the Flyers, potentially moving too with 1 year left at the end of the season. Maybe a team wants a tough guy for the playoffs, something like that. Somebody he's actually pretty defensively responsible as well. He
was a defenseman, so
right. He's not like a negative in any kind of way. He's just offensively very limited. So I guess the next piece of news is another aging player who We suspected was going to get re-signed. Again, I really love Eric Johnson's personality. I was a fan of his when he was in his prime. Eric Johnson re-signs here as the 7th or the 8th defenseman, depending on how things play out. He'll be the guy rotated in. He'll probably, I assume, stick with the team. Again, they still have Ronnie Attard, who I don't think is waiver exempt this year. So they're going to have to maybe even just use LTIR space just to keep the team together that they want to keep. So that might happen anyway because of Ronnie Attard. But Eric Johnson re-signs here as kind of that. And I actually saw Cam York share the signing like with excitement on Instagram and called him Poppy Johnson, which I thought was really interesting. But it shows what his role is in that for that team, where he is that leader, where maybe he's not always going to be a leader on the ice for the entire season. But he actually played pretty well. So I wouldn't even be shocked if like he ends up starting over a guy like Zamula or something like that in certain games, because he still has value and I really like him. And Steve, I'll give it to you because we kind of know Vasili's opinion a little bit about Johnson, but what do you think about Eric Johnson here? I think he's going to be 36 now this season.
You got a young blue line. So, you saw Sanheim. I mean, he could be like what we consider like a late blooming season where like he might be even better next season.
I hope
right.
So, yeah.
And so you have that. But other than that, Cam York is still not that experienced. I mean, how many full NHL seasons does he have?
Yeah.
Drysdale
Last season was his first one, I think.
Exactly. Drysdale. And then the talk of Zamula and Andrea. And so I think that Ristolainen's health is another one where you don't know. I mean, Johnson's health. But he, like, Brias in the press conference, they want, just like Mark Stahl, they want those guys to be mentors. And, when a guy like Cam York, and that's the one thing that we as fans, we get really fed up and angry and frustrated with turnovers and like look at what Trouba's getting from Ranger fans. I mean, they want him gone, but you don't see behind the scenes like the stuff that he does in the locker room. And imagine like if you're like a camp counselor and you're like mentoring and helping like young little kids. And then, when you leave the camp, the parents are like, you suck. You did this with my kid. You this, like, it's almost like with teachers, the poor teachers, when the parents complain to the teachers, like, you don't know my kid. It's almost like the same thing where, we look at what they do on the ice, but with this situation, it's clearly, and Bria said it. He's like, we want him to be a leadership guy, mentor the guys, teach them about, the odds and ends, X's and O's, just the lifestyle. And that probably is also part of the idea that they're going to be rebuilding, even like Chicago, when they're signing all these veterans, a lot of it is because the young guys are curious, just like anybody. When you join a job out of college, you're curious, and people are going to tell you, oh, don't use that bathroom, it's dirty. Or, hey, go to the deli around the corner because it has the better sandwiches. It's the same thing like that. And the GM and the coaches are so busy, they really can't babysit these young guys. So the leadership group in most cases, all these, even for losing or mediocre teams, the leadership group are basically, bridging that relationship. And they could also give feedback to the coaching staff. So Johnson could go back to Torts and be like, dude, I've been talking to Drysdale for months and he just does not stop playing video games. I just made that up, but I'm just saying it's like, it's part of the whole process. So he was cheap. If the Flyers are in a position where they could challenge for a playoff spot again, you would probably want to lean on him on the bottom pairing, unless it becomes such a disaster with him that you have no choice. And even still, I think he's a good pro, right? He understands like he's losing it, and he only has X amount of years left in his career. So, this is what, again, the Flyers have said. They said we're rebuilding, and this is part of that process. You bring back veteran leaders to help mentor the young guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a clear depth signing for the Flyers as a veteran 6th, 7th defenseman. As Briere stated in the press conference, he might not play every game, similar to a Mark Stahl, but they'll put him in, when they deem fit. And I think if you look at the Flyers last season, how many injuries did they have on the back end? So they're probably thinking to themselves, hey, even though we do have a lot of depth in our prospect pool, there's no telling, who might get hurt. It's an NHL season. It's always very physical. Also, there's no telling if maybe certain guys might not be ready to make that jump, right? Like an Andre, like a Hunter McDonald, they might want to give them more AHL time. And then in this case, you don't overexpose maybe a younger player you're trying to develop, and you can put Johnson in there. But just in terms of Johnson, like, I don't think he's a guy that's cooked or has lost it completely or anything. I mean, he's not that same, second pair, first pair type guy that he was way earlier in his career, but I think he could still be a decent option for you on the third pair. He's not going to really do much offensively, but even some plays last season where he made some pretty smart heads up defensive plays in his own end. So he'll be a guy that can be a mentor for a lot of the younger players. He's a really good locker room guy from everything that I've seen, just following his career over the years. Really good leader, obviously, as well. So why wouldn't you want to have a guy like that for some of your young players to learn from, learn the pro game, learn some of the intricacies that they might not be aware of if a guy like that wasn't around. So that's my opinion.
And he's got the leadership in spades, in my opinion, when you hear him talk. And the fact that he's a big boy also helps, right? Like he's a big guy. So, at the very least, he can be that stay at home. It's not like bringing in an undersized defenseman who is a vet. He can be that stay at home guy who blocks shots, plays a physical
And he's
game.
been a top pairing guy in his career before. So he knows exactly like what advice to give to the younger guys about facing a top line.
Yeah.
Like, when to take chances, when not to, etc. I obviously, like, when the GM goes out of his way, not to justify the signing, but he was very specific about the intangibles and the character and the leadership, and that's a good selling point.
And he even said, I played with Johnson myself in his final year in Colorado. So he said, hey, I know how he is in the locker room and how, helpful he can be, how good of a leader he is. So that's important.
I think it's actually an upgrade over Stahl last year.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
But
Definitely.
I think it's even a better option than what they had last year. So yeah, the next piece of news is a surprising piece of news. This was Garnet Hathaway got a 2-year extension a year before his contract ended. He had a $25,000 raise for both seasons. So it is essentially just extending his initial 2-year contract. I would say I'm caught off in the sense that it seemed like it was done early. And I did think just at his age, that there would be an option there to move him at a trade deadline and probably maybe even potentially get like a second round pick for this guy, because the type of game that he plays would be coveted around the playoffs. But it seems like the Flyers just love him. And to be honest with you, the fans loved him too in his first year. Seems to have a lot of value in an aggressive style that the Flyers want to play. Again, he can drop the gloves when needed, but that's, he's definitely not like just a pure brawler or anything like that. He's definitely more of just a power type of grinder that loves to dig in the corners, kills penalties. And I think, he's a fan favorite pretty quickly. So I'm not surprised, but it does seem like they kind of locked him up for the remainder of his career. And I think people were just thought it was a little bit early. I don't think anybody's going to be down on it, but it is a little surprising to see him get a contract this early. Vasili, you want to comment first?
Yeah, sure. So just to go into the specifics, they signed him for 2 years at a $2.4 million cap hit. So like you said, Yariv, it's a very minimal raise. I think his prior hit was $2.375 million.
Yeah.
So he gets a little bit of extra money there. It's definitely interesting because you see the team saying they're going to rebuild or looking to get younger, which is true, but then they're signing an older player like a Hathaway. But like we were saying with a Johnson, just because you have a bunch of young players and you want to filter young players onto your team, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily just going to be all young players, or not going to have veterans there for them to lean on, for them to help and to learn from. So I think this is some of that as well, but it's also just how impactful he was in his fourth line, kind of third line role to end the season, right? Like, for what he's supposed to be, what he's supposed to bring, you couldn't have really asked anything more from him last season. Big hitter when the hits are available, really good defensively. And I think the main thing is just he was so impactful on the penalty kill as well. And you could generally see, not just because of him, the Flyers PK improving so much, but he was a big reason behind that. So I think it's really about locking him up, ensuring that they can keep that penalty kill unit together that really was so successful last season. But I think for a fourth line player, he's probably one of the better fourth liners in the league, and they definitely really like that Hathaway, Paling, Cates combination. So it looks like they want to keep that together for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve?
Vasili said it. I mean, the PK was a big strength of the team last year. It almost made up for the power play. But the Briere said that the cap hit barely changed. You know what I mean? So it's like, why would you get rid of a guy that is added value, familiar with it, with Torts, and comfortable in that system, and effective in a checking role, offers physicality, protection, etc. So the fact that the cap hit didn't barely. I mean, what did you say it was like 25,000?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So yeah, you could stomach that, and like you said, I mean, if things go haywire early or even around the deadline, and you're out of it, it could. I'm assuming that they didn't give him like any type of like restrictions, or
I didn't see anything like that.
Yeah. So this is again good housekeeping by Briere to keep a guy like that, and the ability to have at least one line that you can match up against the top line. And I don't know what the analytics would say. When it's 4 versus 1 or 3 versus 1, it's always going to be slanted towards the better players. But I don't remember them with Cates, so I can't comment on that. But when they had Delorier there is in camp and then into the early part of the season, I think that kind of helped the Fly. I don't know what the production was, but it seemed like having that was like an effective, like, because some teams, the fourth line or drives them nuts, and there's always promoting, demoting guys. If you could have that one line, it's almost like Cizikas, Martin, and Clutterbuck with the Islanders. Like, they were like legit.
It's stability, right?
It's stability. It's like, it's peace of mind. So yeah, it's a good move.
To your point, Steve, like Hathaway, I'm looking just at some analytics, and like he is he's an analytical darling, is what you would call him, like in terms of his even strength defense metrics, like his PK metrics. So it makes sense. And with the 2.4 million, like you said, if they totally tank and like end up being a bottom 5 team for some reason, you could trade him easily at that cap hit, especially with the cap going up.
Yeah. He's like the Nick Sealer of the offensive unit, right? He is the style that the Flyers want their team to mimic. The go, every shift, and he can actually play. He's not like, he's not a guy who's working hard to make the NHL. He's a guy who's made the NHL and works hard at every moment of the game. So
yeah, and the other key thing too is that, Briere basically said that this is Tortorella's team. Well, like, the lineup is Tortorella's decision. So there's no way that Torts wasn't, asked.
Yes.
Like, who are we keeping, who are we not, who could we get rid of, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going to assume that Torch was like, we got to keep him. I mean, if we want to have XYZ addressed, he's the guy to have. So
yeah,
Coach likes him, freaking keep him.
Yeah, that's a great point. So our next topic, and I do have Luchenko written here, but let's wait on talking about Luchenko because we'll talk about him during the draft. But the dev camp just opened up for the Flyers. It started today. All the players were there. Bonk, Barkey, not all of them. Kolosov has not arrived. As far as we know, that what was explained by Danny Briere is that Kolosov played a lot of hockey and asked for some more time. That is what we will assume for now. We really don't know why he's at camp, but we are told that he will be joining the Phantoms, so that he will be back. But all the other guys are there. Barkey, Bonk, Gill is there, Berglund is there, Luchenko is there, some camp invites as well. I don't want to go through the whole list, but dev camp is exciting. I'm going to try to make it down there for some of the drills and whatnot, but it's really just an early taste. And for those of you who are not kind of aware what dev camp is, it's really just an opportunity for the coaching staff to work with the players, show them some things that they will need to learn on their journey to the NHL, help them improve certain aspects of their game, their rituals, and how to just be a pro, right? It's their first kind of glance. And like even Hunter McDonald is still there, he's with the Phantoms already, but like they still, span it out. The one X factor there is Michkov. I think everybody was hoping he'd be there. If he was there, it would be mobbed. He is not going to be there. So it's still full, but it didn't go like berserk crazy like it could have been if Michkov was there. Steve, I'll go to you first on this one. What are your thoughts about dev camp in general? Maybe, something we might not know.
It's college orientation. Okay. So like think about like you just had 7 or 6, 7, right? Yeah, 7 kids just drafted.
Yeah.
So they did not know until it became official, right? So they have no idea what to expect. They have to do all the press stuff, but now we have the integration period. So although you have guys that are coming back, I think the player devs, this is like for the player development staff, not the scouts, not the the player development is a pretty important I guess staff or group within the development process, because that they are the ones integrating them and tracking their development. A lot of kids won't be like, they're not under complete Flyer control. They're not all going to be at Lehigh Valley. They're going to be playing in some cases Europe or in college or in the CHL. And so they lose that ability to have them all in one spot. And they introduce them to team policies, to team, do's and don'ts, the rules, social media. They get lectures. They get, all this type of stuff. So it's basically like a college orientation, right? When you go to college or you get sometimes a new job, there's always an integration period. So it's really like part of it. So it's not like it's for jobs or whatever. Like, maybe if one kid really stands out, like some of the invites, the kids that weren't drafted, we've seen those kids get drafted, eventually signed to an AHL deal in the past, not often, but sometimes. So overall, it's a way to get the group together. In a perfect world, like it briefs like this could be the core of a future Stanley Cup contender or like whatever they say. It's a lot of these kids are alphas. A lot of them they've been the number one guy in their team. So you look, I think what the play dev staff looks for is, are there any bad habits? Are there any guys that we need to worry about? Like this kid has really been a puck hog, while this other kid, he's been too unselfish. And it's all about, like I said, taking notes, jotting things down. For fans, like I've learned not to get too excited about dev camp.
Right. Same.
I went, in Nashville, they have the development tournaments. Those are fun.
Yeah.
Right. Because they get to wear the uniform. They get to play in a real game and they're competitive. There's hitting. So it's almost like a mini preseason. But this is more for like, it's also, these kids have been off. They haven't played, they want to see who's been working out, who hasn't been working out, who's been watching film. And that's just, again, it's everybody has a file. Everybody's got a file. Every player in the system has a file, and the players don't know what's on that file. The GM, scouting directors, play development staff, etc., like analytics, that they're all, making little notes. And I do think that there's an internal ranking. I don't think every team does it, but I'm going to guess that there is some type of internal ranking, who they have as favorites, who they're going to fast track, etc. So this is just part of the process. That's it.
Yeah, I think dev camp, to Steve's point, I mean, he summed it up pretty perfectly. There's not much I can add, but it's really just a familiarization process between, the teams and the players, and them kind of understanding, okay, this is the Flyers organization. This is what I need to expect, and vice versa. And it's a chance for the player dev staff to really get their first look up close in person with these kids. Like, for example, I think the Flyers had like their director of player development, Riley Armstrong, there taking a look at all the prospects. They had John LeClaire there as well. They had the skills coach Angelo Ricci there working with all the players. I'm sure a ton of other staff as well. So just getting a first look at them and kind of seeing, okay, what kind of skills do they have? We want to see all this stuff up close and personal, and kind of showing them a little glimpse of like the pro hockey life, the pro hockey kind of lifestyle and the game and what to expect.
Yeah. And the other thing is that for some of these kids, we all know they're not going to be NHL players. So this is the beginning of what could be a really short, let's say, like a honeymoon period, where like it's like a marriage, right? You don't know if the marriage is going to last, but the honeymoon's always fun. So it's like you take advantage of it, resources, right? The teams it's a $1 billion industry. So if you're a young kid and you're going there, ask for the free resources, film sessions, etc. Get it all in. Like you said, Vasili, the skating advisors, like they're advisors for everything, anything you want, sports psychiatrists, etc. If you're a prospect, dude, take full advantage. Don't just go there and I'm happy to be here and etc. Like get involved because you don't know if it's going to last. So, you get the free stuff, you get the equipment, the gym bag and the shirts and everything. That's fine. But while you're there, you could really learn something at a young age. And if you go, let's say, become a career professional in Europe, or you become you're in the ECHL, I think a lot of players, what they say is that Dev Camp was a really good introduction. And the teams know that generations change and that you have to treat each one differently. Like I don't think that Dev Camp is like a boot camp. Some teams, maybe they'll do that and they just yell at them and punish them. I don't think that would be productive, but I think with the Flyers and their desire to create a new culture, it's going to be welcoming and there's a lot of talent there too. So you really are going to see. And I think for Flyers fans who are going, or if they stream the games, you're looking at Barkey, you're looking at Bonk. Is my boy Bump going to be there? Is he allowed?
He is, yeah.
All right, there you go. So you watch, let's say, Bump versus Bonk in a one-on-one situation. Little things like that are interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Really well said. And for those of you who are not aware, they're going to be doing the trial on the Isle, which is when they go to the Jersey Shore typically, and that will be on the 4th of July. So I think they're doing the off ice stuff like during the holiday. I think it's open to the public to some degree. I've never gone to one, but I'm sure you can go check that out. And then the scrimmage itself will be on Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And it probably will be webcast. I think it was webcast last year.
The Flyers YouTube channel, they usually put it up there.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Good.
Yeah, and they don't do a full-on scrimmage anymore. Now they do like half-rink scrimmages where they separate them, and then they do a tournament of 4 teams. And then they have those teams kind of play each other, and then the winner of, the tournament, or the 2 best teams play each other, and then there's like a winner of the tournament every year. So that is the best part of Def Camp for sure. Okay, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this episode. I'll actually have Vasili open up first just to tell us, as the man on the ground, the man who was actually on site for this draft. Vasili, like, general thoughts, like maybe give some people like what it was like to be at the draft. It was obviously a real spectacle on TV. The Sphere was very cool to see. Seemed like a great place to have the draft as far as like visually. Though I do hear that Nashville, and that as a shout out to you, Steve, I believe you're in Nashville, right? Yep. Apparently that's where most people want to have it, that are working in the NHL, but it seemed like it was a big success from a publicity standpoint, just the image of it.
It definitely lived up to what you all saw on TV in terms of the spectacle factor. Like, being there, it definitely felt like a spectacle. It was different from any draft I've been to. Like, if I compare the drafts when I went in Montreal 2 years ago and then Nashville last season, I mean, they were really fun, but it doesn't compare to what essentially was happening at this draft. And just the cool, full kind of Sphere monitor they have, and, blowing these young guys who are getting picked their faces up, and essentially throughout all of Vegas, they're able to be seen. I mean, that's such a cool thing as an 18-year-old kid to be drafted and have your face blown up on the Sphere in Vegas for everybody to see that you're getting drafted to the NHL. Like, pretty cool. No other city could really replicate something like that. I will say though, Nashville was really fun. So if they ever brought the draft back to Nashville, I wouldn't be disappointed. But overall, I mean, just really great to be there. Everybody, that is there at the Sphere in terms of the staff, really nice, super accommodating. But yeah, just on the floor in general was awesome. And I mean, I don't still think we have confirmation on if the draft is 100% going to be become centralized going forward. But I know there was rumors and rumblings from the draft that if it was, they might have been thinking of, okay, Vegas, the Sphere, maybe we'll just do it here every single year. So it would be interesting if they did go that route.
Yeah. Steve, thoughts on the draft?
All right. Well, for me, it's the culminating event, for like 12 months of research and analysis and whatever. So I was more interested in just to see how things would unfold.
Sure.
I've had a. It's for me, to be honest with you, I could just keep like the TV on mute. I used to go to the draft a lot. I stopped because I could get more work done here, like in an office environment. And actually, Vasili, to your point about the centralization, Yzerman had a press conference before the draft, and he was very, very blunt. Like, he does not like the old setup that you're in the tables and you're cramped, and it's noisy and everything. Now they had this big horn for the trades. He was like, I want to be my staff. We want to be comfortable in a room, privacy, use a phone, just like the NFL and the NBA. So I think from a functionality standpoint, yeah, it's not official, I think, just yet, but it seems like, and Yzerman kind of said, like, well, this is me personally, but a lot of guys said it as well. Like, I like when they do something new, and I know that you have to respect the amount of work that goes into pulling something like this off, the logistics, the planning, the multiple staffs, the coordinating. It must be bananas. I could sympathize to a degree. When you're trying to plan like a big event, it's just a shame that that the hype dies within 48 hours because of free agency. But like,
right,
the visuals were great. And I'm as far as like where to have it. Hey, listen, I'm a New Yorker. Like NBA, NFL. I mean, you could do it different cities, but it's all going to come down to money, and they're gonna see how much it really cost to have everybody there. Because remember, these kids, if the kids are going to be there, you got to put them up in hotels, and that's of course a lot of money. So we'll see. Versus like, let's say one dedicated location, like do it New York 5 years in a row, then LA or whatever 5 years in a row, or you still give a city the ability to host it, make it a fan fest, more so than they have it already now, because you want the fans on the floor. That's what's good. That's what
should be cool. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And but you got to tip your cap to the NHL for pulling it off, because it was to get that venue, to facilitate. And again, it's Vegas. There's a lot of people that could have played there or used the facility. The NHL, so no, we're doing it. So we'll see. But I think they'll probably announce it within the next like 30 days. Or
yeah, they usually do. And I think to your point, Steve, like about the Yzerman stuff, I think a lot of teams probably feel that way, where they'd be more productive like at their headquarters, and it might be easier to make trades when there isn't, all the other 31 GMs around you and potentially like listening in on what's happening or like hearing rumblings. So who knows?
The timeline too, like the clock. They're like, Yzerman mentioned the clock, like, you look up, you're like, oh my God, I have 5 seconds. Whereas, because you get distracted from all the noise going on and everything. So
I think there's probably a hybrid solution where maybe you bring a team representative out there to meet the player on stage, but like again, if they're going to do it at Vegas, you could put the GM up in the on the big screen to make the announcement, so they're still kind of there. Like, there's probably some kind of hybrid solution, because if I was in Yzerman's perspective, I would also prefer to be in a room with my team, where you can yell and scream at each other and do whatever you got to do and make that final argument. You can pick up the phone with nobody listening, and there probably is some solution that can be done there. So I think it's going to change regardless of what they pick, but it seems like there is a want to change it. So for me, it's funny. Like, I actually I'm starting to turn more into you, Steve, where like they were doing the Celine Dion thing, and I'm like, let's go, announce the pick. I'm like, I don't care about the show, and I just want to see where the players are picked. I want to let them have their moment on stage. That I'm cool with. That doesn't need to be rushed. But beyond that, I'm like, everything else, like the thank yous and all that, unless it's like somebody passing away, I'm like, I don't care.
No, it's gotten a lot better. It used to be, it was like self-serving central, where like these freaking owners made it about them. The guy from Arizona, thank God he's gone. He would give a freaking
Chaika.
No. One of the owners, or the
Morello, I think.
Marulo, the other guy.
Oh, okay.
He would always like, Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I agree. It's just like I said. You just say, and the one thing that did make me upset again this year, though, they do it every year. They don't say the position. They don't say the position. They just say we take from this team this one. What position does he play? We know what position he plays, but everybody else doesn't know. And I think in hockey you have six different positions. So say left wing, Cole Eiserman, goaltender,
Yeah.
Yegorov. So yeah, but maybe that changes with if Bettman's going to be doing the announcing or whatever. But in football, they say, safety, linebacker, or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
So before we get into specific prospects, let's just do a general. Let's be honest. This draft did not go the way the, I guess, online scouts anticipated. It was a complete cluster, and I think right from the very beginning, obviously after Levshinov was taken, and just Beckett sent. I will say the highlight is Beckett Seneca's reaction to being drafted third overall, which I did hear rumored prior to that, so it wasn't that shocking to me. And the Flyers fans obviously were shocked about Luchenko. I think that one, if you look Luchenko, I think even outproduced Seneca in the same league. But it does seem like the kid has a high ceiling. And what I think it's like a lesson for those who maybe you're younger and you haven't been through these drafts a lot, like these pre-rankings and a lot of that, they do not always line. Sometimes they do. They not line up with the media narrative behind it. And Steve, since you've been working so hard on this, with all of the different curveballs that were kind of take there, like Yakimchuk being taken early and, obviously Iserman dropping all the way to, I think it was 21, dropped beyond the latest that I saw. What were your kind of thoughts watching this, with your own rankings of these players and kind of where players were taken? Did you feel like teams were going way off the board? Did you feel like this was a cluster? Do you think it was, pretty appropriate, for the talent levels that the players were taking?
Well, I don't rank my players based on any consensus, anything.
Right.
I rank based on or draft trends. I rank like what are they going to be when they're like 5-10 years in the NHL. So I don't care about size. Size does not mean a thing to me. If you blow me away with the way you play, I'm ranking you high. So the surprise to me, not necessarily a surprise, but I had Boyum and Hellenius in my top 5-6, right? And they both dropped. Eiserman, we knew that he was probably going to fall a little bit because of the one-dimensional aspect to his game. The Seneca thing, Anaheim, they threw a little bit of a curveball last year. By the consensus was Fantilli, and they took Leo Carlson. So, I think teams definitely tailored their draft board for need. That was my big takeaway.
Yeah.
And I'm doing my report. See, my report cards, I don't do them 24 hours, 48 hours after. I have to go back and watch all the press conferences before the draft. I got to watch them after the draft. Were the GMs forthright? Were they not? Did they make changes? Because they always say best player available, and people could disagree with me on this. The best player available is their best player available. And they can make their list any way they want. They could have a list of 9 defensemen and say he was our best player available. That doesn't mean he was the best player available overall. So, like, for example, Jet Lachenko, we'll talk about him. You could make an argument that 5 or 6, 7 guys were the better players, right? Like they might have a brighter future, more productive, etc. So I think teams, especially, remember we talked about this. We said that their pools are loaded. The same teams drafting in the same spots every year. So what do? You look at the one area where you're weak in and you target that weakness. Detroit did it. The Flyers did it. We knew that, hey, they've only drafted 5 centers in the last 5 years, and they drafted like 18 wings. Briere said it's no secret that we're short on center. Who were their first 2 picks? Frickin' centers. You know what I mean? So it's like it went the way I knew it would, but it was the size took over everything.
Yeah.
Even in the second round, third round, second day. I'm sorry. I tweeted this out. Teams left a ton of skill on the table, and it could be a referendum on the future, the direction that hockey's heading in. Is that we saw, I remember it. I don't know about you guys, but I remember those 94, 95, 96, 97 drafts, right in the middle of the dead puck era. Why? Because of the New Jersey Devils. The Flyers, all the moves the Flyers made after getting Lindros, right? They traded away Mark Recchi. Mark Recchi was a smaller finesse guy to get the bigger John LeClaire, Michael Renberg. It was a trend, and it's a copycat league, and everybody followed suit. So Chris Gratton, remember when the Flyers went and got him? He wasn't, he was a right, but so we're going to see, the next couple of drafts, and Central Scouting has a hand in this. They're going to rank the big boys higher. Little guys, not so much. Unless they do something phenomenal. But then again, look at Boyum. He did something phenomenal, and he fell out of the top 10. So keep an eye on the next couple of drafts. If teams are going to go to that, is it going to impact the skill level and the scoring? I don't know. Scoring was a little out of control the last couple of years, right? We had teams giving up 300 goals for the first time since the frickin' early 90s, right? Almost like a bunch of them. So we could be seeing a goalie heyday now, a defensive heyday. If you're a checker, you're going to get the big bucks. If you're a finesse smaller guy, you miss the boat. So keep an eye on that.
We saw that in free agency.
Oh,
guys like Shane Gostisbehere not being able to get money, and
even Sean Walker got less than I thought he would.
He straight up said when they traded the pick, I thought of you, Yariv, and I said,
worse.
Oh, Minnesota with Brackett, they're going to take the skill. They don't care. They do, but they needed like that elite in their system. They have good defensemen, but they needed an elite power play quarterback like the freaking Flyers did. But Briere said the size was a factor, but they drafted the smaller center instead of getting a bigger guy like, Hage or Boisvert. So it's kind of like weird how size was a factor with Boyum, not so much with the center ice position.
Yeah.
Yeah, the draft trends, I think in general, like really interesting. I think it kind of shows that despite what the consensus is online or what you're reading, and all these different kind of draft reports from all over the internet, the scouts don't really care or probably looking at that. They care about what they saw, what their scouting experiences of watching the players were like, and what their list says. They're not going to go off a consensus or, what TSN or Sportsnet or whoever these big media outlets are kind of saying or what they're putting out there. And then to your point, like size definitely was a huge factor. Like there's like a lot of smaller skilled players that dropped a ton when they probably maybe should have gone a little higher when you just look at like best player available in terms of who's the better hockey player on the ice. And even if you look at the Flyers, like specifically look at their day 2 draft, Berglund 6'4", Gill 6'4", Rahonen 6'1", Powell 6'1". Like they drafted some guys for size. I mean, Briere said it just happened to fall that way, but when there's a trend like that, I mean, you kind of have to look at it and say there's something the team's trying to do here. And then to your point as well, like from the Flyers perspective, just look at the centers, right? Luchenko's a center, Berglund's a center, Rahonen's a center. So they were obviously looking to add to their center depth just because they haven't drafted a lot of centers in the past. And even Briere kind of said this, that, hey, its center is something that we want to eventually address. That's what he said in his pre-draft press conference. And it looks like they did do some of that in this draft for sure. And with, a ton of draft picks coming up in 2025, I'd imagine if they don't, trade some of them away, they're probably going to be looking at drafting even more centers too.
Oh, yeah. And at the top, and we'll talk about that, I guess. It is. Yeah.
Yeah, the Flyers clearly punted on this year in general. I don't know how high they were on this draft beyond some of the, some of the players that were already taken. And seemed like that was kind of baked into their decision making. And that's why I want to talk about 2025, because I think the Flyers, they've been talking about it, quite frankly, for a little bit already. Danny's been trying to get more first round picks for 2025. And I think he jumped on that opportunity. So that's why I want to talk about 2025. But man, Steve, when Boyum landed on 12, I was like, they're not going to do it. I was like, I want this guy so bad. I'm biased. Again, he's Israeli. I'm Israeli. I'm like, it would be so amazing to have this Israeli player on the Flyers. But to be honest with you, after seeing all the craziness, I was hoping for Berkeley Catton, but he was the exception, I guess, to the size rule. I thought he was a great pickup for Seattle, to be honest with you, play with Matty Beniers down the line. So I was a little disappointed.
That might have been the trigger.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that was probably the high on the Flyers list as a guy they wanted to go for, right?
Because we said that we don't know if it's going to be D first and then forwards. It'll push the forwards down, but instead it was the forward. Remember, like the guys at the draft were like, "Oh, this is surprising." No, it's not surprising. We knew it was a possibility that it was going to be. If teams are like, you know what, forwards, you could get quality because it's a deep defense, a defense heavy draft. That you could probably get first round quality even in the second round. So you could take a little. But the forwards not the case. I think there was a big skill disparity from the top forwards. So we saw obviously Chicago with Levshinov first. It was a little bit of a surprise, consider in terms of they didn't frickin' need him, but and I don't think he was the best player available either. But then we saw the run of forwards, so that might have played against the Flyers.
Yeah,
that they were like, and remember I said Lindstrom might fall because of the injuries. Hellenius will be there, Catton because of his size. And Luchenko was a guy that I had middle first, like late teens, mid to late teens. So,
Okay. Yeah, and Salayev was also, I guess, a surprise. And the Devils,
that was very surprising to me.
They don't need him, but they went for him anyway.
His type they need in the system, but not necessarily because they just drafted Nemetz and Hugh very high. So
it was an interesting draft. I'll say that. And
it was.
Yeah. So let's get into the Flyers specifically. Now, they obviously they traded back. They got a third round pick that they later leveraged to move up into the second round. Ended up taking 2 second round picks instead of just one, which, without knowing too much about the players, I still have a lot of time to learn about them. Obviously, Steve, you're the expert here. I did do some homework on Luchenko, though. I went and watched not just highlights. I went and watched shift by shift videos on him so I can understand him better as a player. Obviously, surface level, it's the motor, the skating in particular, and obviously had a humongous jump in productivity from his first year where he only put up 14 points to putting up 74 his second year. So it seems to me on the surface level with Jet Luchenko, this is a guy that, bare minimum is a third line player in the league, but the Flyers kind of see that there's a lot of growth coming. That he grew a lot in 1 year and that they hope to see another jump like that, maybe 100+ point season next year, and that he could evolve to be a lot more. They obviously had Hellenius still on the board and went with Luchenko, I think for a big reason of skating in particular, where obviously the game is heading, with size, but also better skating. So Jet Luchenko was taken 13th overall. Steve, I'll open it up to you and then Vasili obviously comment afterwards, but yeah, we want to learn more about all 7 players. So let's go through the first one, Jet Luchenko, number 13. What can you tell us about Jet?
All right, so he played for Guelph, and Guelph was a really thin team.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those situations where, like Forster, he was the MVP of Barrie, but he had some help there, right? Brand Clark was there, Evan Vierling, the other guy, Ethan Cardwell. So he had some support there, but even though that was Forster's team, whereas Guelph did not have a whole lot. They lost Poitras, Poitras was supposed to be their number 1 center.
Right.
And he basically he made the jump to the Bruins. It was a fantastic rookie. So I think Danny Zhilkin was the other guy. I don't know if he got traded, but Guelph basically had really good centers, and Luchenko was a high OHL priority pick. He wasn't like some guy that came out of nowhere. They considered him to be a potential, what's it called? Like a future leader, like top center guy. But again, like Zhilkin, because he was a late birthday, I think he ended up going to the AHL with Winnipeg, and then Poitras made the frickin' Bruins out of camp. So now Guelph is like, all right, now they had some pieces there. Cam Allen is a veteran guy, a Washington draft pick. But he basically was a B-level prospect, I think, in the beginning of the season, hot mid-second, played it to Helenka. But then very early into his season, you saw that Guelph kind of ran through him. And so I think someone asked the question if the U18 Worlds played into it, but I'm pretty sure that his play year, and Briere said that the scouts got on him very early, saw what they liked, what they saw, and then stuck with him, and he never let them down. And that really was, I mean, he was the team MVP. So for a team, and they got into the playoffs too, they probably wouldn't have if he wasn't there. So what does Briere say that they look for? They look for IQ, they look for speed, they look for creativity and work ethic. And that's what they liked about Luchenko. So the thing is, though, my pick would have been Hellenius, because although Luchenko did his part in the CHL, and although playing against men is never a guarantee, look at Capo Caco, we learned that the hard way, that Hellenius maybe doesn't have the foot speed that Luchenko has, but that you would have more control of getting him into your system earlier because he's European. There's 2 years now where Luchenko is going to have to play in the CHL, like Borky, like Bonk. Whereas with Hellenius, you would have had him, at least you could have had him in Lehigh Valley as early as next season. So considering his playmaking ability is elite, well, both of them are elite playmakers, and then with the Flyers wingers, I thought that Hellenius would have been the smarter pick. But if you watch Luchenko play, he's an easy guy to root for. And he checks a lot of boxes, not just playmaking, not just running a power play from the half wall. It's the whole situation. So he can handle, what I like about him too is he can handle a bigger defenseman in board battles. So you watch him play. He's not like this overtly aggressive and tough, but he doesn't get intimidated by bigger players. So like if he gets knocked off a puck, it's going to happen. He bounces right back up and he keeps fighting, and the stick work. And that was the other thing. There was a trend with Flyer draft picks and stick work, specifically when they're not on the puck and what they do with their stick. The kid Powell's got a phenomenal stick work. He makes up for his lack of skating, but we'll talk about him. But so I think that they definitely see him as a franchise center. I don't know if he's going to have maybe that presence like a Cutter Gauthier would have had, all things considered. But it was a smart, safe pick. I just don't know if he's going to be the 1C, and if all the talk that they're saying about next year, then the intent could be to get into the top 5, because now you're looking at legit franchise, unquestionable centers who could be the next, for Philadelphia, they could be the next Mike Richards or Jeff Carter, whichever one was the number one, or Lindros or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that is what I was assuming as well. And just a quick question here on Luchenko. One of the things I noticed about him is that there was a knock on his shot. After watching him, and I went through his game-by-game statistics, because obviously I didn't watch every one of his games, but I noticed he actually really didn't even shoot in the beginning of the season. He would maybe average a shot a game, and then that intensified considerably as the season went on. He started having 3-4 shots a game rather than having 1 or no shots a game. What do you see with like his shooting? Because 20 goals is not, 54 assists is great. 20 goals, it's okay. It's not bad, especially considering he's one of the youngest in his age bracket, right? So he just missed next year's draft. Do you think he has a problem with shooting, or do you kind of suspect what I'm saying? Right. Okay.
I mean, listen, is he going to be the next, Zibanejad, where he clobbers the puck off the pass and he's the one-time option for the power play? No, you want him running the power play and making those feeds. So, and the other thing about the shot is 2 words, okay? Jack Hughes. Everybody said this kid had a muffin shot. I never said it. I was like, well, who cares? Like a shot is so easy to develop. Anyone who's played hockey, roller hockey, street hockey, whatever, all you got to do is just practice your wrist shot. Now, like guys like, I'll go to date myself, Scott Gomez, okay? He was the king of the wrister in the crest. King of the wrister in the crest. Every time, very fast player, pass first. It doesn't necessarily make him, predictable, because goalies know, well, he's not going to beat me with his shot. The Flyers, first of all, have all these wingers anyway. So do you want Luchenko to be the guy doing the shooting, or you want him to be feeding pucks through seams, threading the needle, feeding the point, peeling back, drawing attention? The stick handling and the vision is more important to me. So I don't care what he does with his shot. He's got soft hands, so he can bury pucks in close, but he's a center. Like, so, with the way that the Flyers pool is being constructed and all they have finishers all over the place, right? Forster has a great shot. He could finish. Tuamala. Now you got Michkov. It's going to keep getting. Brink is another guy that isn't like that great of a shooter, right? Unless he's improved it. I mean, to me, he was always a pass first guy. Quick hands, could roof backhand is in close. Like, I mean, it just seems sometimes that people try to find things wrong just to say, hey, he needs to improve. He needs to improve his skating. He needs to improve. Everything's going to get improved. Everything will get improved. This is what development camp and training camp and everything is for. They'll have specialists and trainers. It's not going to make or break what Jet Luchenko becomes in the league. If he just keeps working hard, having the speed, when he packs on muscle, he doesn't lose that separation speed. But the key thing for me with Luchenko is always the freaking vision and the passing in traffic. Very, very, very tough to do. So I think that's what the stick work. He's a two-way type. He's good defensively. He could kill penalties, a shorthanded threat, odd man rushes. You could trust him, right? How many times you see guys on odd man rush? I'll just dump it in or try some stupid pass that makes you mad. He doesn't really do that. He delays. He spots the trailer. So he would, if he had more talent, he would have had more assists. You know what I mean? But he was, and that's another to knock Guelph because there was, it was top heavy. But yeah, I like the player. I just thought maybe to obsess over him and bypass a guy like Boisvert with the size and the skill. I mean, this kick is a game breaker. And then Hellenius, those were the guys I would have targeted instead. But again, it's still, I think he's going to be like 2C, 3C at worst, but not a bad thing. And then you got to figure if you're going to put a smaller guy like Barkey on his wing, I think they'll make a lot of money together. You know what I mean? I mean, even though they're smaller guys, but look at Cowan and Barkey. You give them a big wing to complement them, and you could have a pretty productive trio.
Yeah, I think obviously people were a little taken away by the Luchenko pick. They weren't expecting the Flyers to select Luchenko specifically. Like personally, I thought it would be Hellenius after they traded back and it wasn't Boyum. And I mean, to your point with Hellenius, like the skating's a knock, but how many guys have we seen skating been a knock for in the league? And they improve that tenfold as they kind of make their way to the NHL. But like Yariv, I mean, I wasn't somebody who had Luchenko on my radar. Kind of came as a surprise. So I didn't really do a lot of homework on him pre-draft, but I did do a ton of research on him in the past couple of days just to kind of see his game, what it was all about. One of the important things to note, right? He's an August 21st birthday, so he's born less than 30 days away from the 2024 draft eligibility. So he's a lot younger than a lot of people in the draft class. And, when you're 17, 18-year-old and you're not, fully mature yet as a individual, that can make a huge difference, obviously. So he has some extra time to mature, put extra muscle on, things like that. Obviously, another thing too, is his combine testing. I mean, we didn't really, talk about that too much and how important the combine could be, but he did finish in the top 5 and 6 of 10 on ice categories at the CHL Top Prospects on ice testing. So that was a huge thing. Also in the NHL combine testing, there was a couple of categories where he was pretty high up. So in agility, he was tied for second. In mean power output, he was first place. Fatigue index, he was 7th. Body fat percentage, he was 7th. Vertical jump, 2nd. Squat jump, 8th. No arm jump, 4th. Left hand grip, 1st. Right hand grip, 1st. And that's pretty impressive for a guy that's a lot younger than a lot of the other players. For me though, and if you look at his game, it just seems like he's a complete player. Like he's a 3 zones type of player, right? Like there's not one specific part of the ice where like, hey, like he really needs to improve that. He's pretty well rounded for his age already. Obviously, like Steve was saying, the passing and the playmaking is a huge asset, and that's one of the huge factors to his game. Really deceptive passer. A lot of backdoor passes from what I saw of him, setting teammates up on the back door, but also too, like he used look-offs a lot. So like when I mean look-offs, I mean like he's looking one way, but he's passing the other way, and he's kind of trying to deceive defenses doing that, like through traffic, which is, I think that's a very important asset to have, because at the NHL level, the more you telegraph things, the easier it is to defend, right? So it's great that he already has that in his skill set, but the real dynamic factor in his game, if there is a dynamic factor, is the skating ability, specifically the mechanics in his skating, like the acceleration, the agility, the balance. You put that all together, right? And even the speed in general in terms of creating, offense off the rush. And he's a really tremendous skater, probably one of the best skaters in the draft class if you look at the whole package of his skating mechanics, and also the high motor and durability, right? Like Briere even mentioned this in his press conference with the skating. He's going to be a guy that's a candidate to log really, tough minutes, really high minutes in games due to that skating ability. And then the defensive play too is a big thing, and that's where the hockey IQ and the anticipation skills and how he reads the game kind of comes into play. Board battles, like Steve was saying, he's able to seal off other players on the boards and take the puck away, which is great to see from a player that still has some developing to do. Sometimes the defensive game is something that can come last. And yeah, for Luchenko, I mean, for me personally, like I said, I was expecting it to be Hellenius, but I don't think it's a bad pick. And I think there's a lot of aspects to his game that you can look at and say, hey, like this projects to be, a top 6 player in the NHL. And the speed for sure is one of the huge factors, like I said, right? The kid can absolutely fly. If you saw some of the development camp highlights today, he scored like an absolutely highlight reel goal where he kind of cuts back and absolutely blows by a defender and scores. I mean, it is still development camp, but to see that stuff is obviously great. And I think the skating is going to be a huge part of his game, as well as like the two-way ability.
Yeah, and I also noticed in the footage that was a great breakdown. He's got an ability to really draw the opposition towards him, and that's really what you look for in a playmaker, right? He like does it with his skating, with his vision. He'll draw the team, one into covering a certain play, and then go completely cross ice through the crease. And like you mentioned, the back door, like I called him the master of the back door in the video I made about him, because it's just every single play he was looking for that backdoor option. He would consistently leave his teammates wide open for either a shot on net or a goal. And I thought that was actually really impressive. And Steve, maybe you can remove this thought. There was a slew of Flyers fans who immediately went, oh, great, the Flyers drafted a bottom 6 forward. This is Scott Laughton all over again. And then after looking into the guy, I go, they play nothing alike. Absolutely nothing alike, outside of the fact that Scott Laughton, I guess, is a two-way guy.
Two-way center from the OHL. Maybe that's about
right.
it. But
He's outproduced Scott Laughton at the same point in his career. And like you said, he came from a program where he wasn't surrounded by a slew of talent. Can you at least dispel that for the people listening?
I mean, listen, if you bottom line is very simple when it comes to fans being upset or happy with the draft pick. They have their sights on 3 to 5 guys. If those guys don't go, they don't like the pick. Okay, look at me, for example. I just said I would rather have Hellenius, right? Because when all the watching and film sessions and studying and stat analyses and everything, I came to the conclusion that Hellenius is the better prospect. So when Luchenko was drafted, my automatic initial thought was the Flyers could have drafted somebody better. But eventually, and this happens every year, all those fans, anything, the World Juniors, he had a secondary assist against Latvia. We love him. It's just within the first 48 to 72 hours of the draft. Eventually, within a matter of weeks, those fans, they'll be freaking grabbing video of him dipsy doodling and like, and they're going to be arguing with other fans online saying, no, Luchenko is far superior than Hellenius.
Right.
So, like that's just how it goes. Everybody eventually warms up to it. And the bigger reason why is because a lot of the fans haven't seen him play. You know what I mean? They haven't seen him, like, they don't have that context. They haven't seen him, let's say, if I were them, go watch when Guelph played London. That would be a good litmus test, right? When Luchenko is centering the top line and the top PP against one of the greatest CHL teams we've seen in the last decade, and see how he performs against Bonk and Barkey and Cowan and Dickinson and that would be like, oh wow, he's actually, and that's part of the allure too, is is that he held his own. He represented the position, the responsibilities very well. It's not like he was like, oh, I'm intimidated. I only produce against the blowout games. Again, garbage time. Point stat compiler. Like, no, that's not the case.
Well, that's great to hear. I'm really excited to see him evolve. And
they needed him. They needed
a center.
Is they freaking needed a center. So he's not Gauthier, but what was my biggest criticism of Gauthier is that he's more of a shooter than a passer, and that at the World Juniors, before he even ditched the Flyers, I was like, he's really not playmaking a whole lot. He's not creating anything. Like he looked pretty sloppy. And I was careful about saying that because I don't want to upset you guys because I don't know how you felt, but you do not get
him
that.
all you want now.
Well, I know, now, but Luchenko is a good. Let him not shoot because when you got Michkov waiting on the other side with the hammer cock, that's who you want passing the puck. So it's a good need pick.
And I guess one thing to add too before we move on to the next guy with the Boyum stuff and passing on him, and this is something actually that Jamie found out kind of before everybody else did in the Flyers media sphere, but Boyum's actually represented by the same agent as Cutter Gauthier, right. So take that as you will if that factors into the situation.
I definitely think he does.
I'm sure the terms, I'm sure the terms between
Kurt
the Flyers.
Overhart.
Yeah, exactly, Kurt Overhart. So I'm sure the relationship between Overhart and the Flyers with all that Gauthier situation isn't great, so it makes a lot lot to me.
You can even speculate that Boyum hired him to avoid the Flyers. I mean, just but I'm saying, like, do we ever find out, like, really what the reason is? He'll never tell us.
We'll probably never find out. Maybe in 20 years in some sort of book or something.
I can't wait for that game. I can't wait.
Yeah, me too. Anyway. I don't think the Flyers players are going to be very happy about what Cutter Gauthier, the way he left. Again, it's not the problem that he left; it's the way that he left.
Yeah,
that I think put a bad taste in people's mouth. I don't have a problem with a player trying to control his own destiny. I do have a problem with
listen, when we're talking about the Michkov rooting against him, Gauthier gave everybody every reason to root against him.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I don't want to play for you. I'm not going to talk to your legends.
I'm not going to talk to John LeClaire.
Yeah. Good luck to you, Cutter. Yeah. I think you'll need it with that attitude.
Hey, listen, just to show you how petty I am, not that I'm a Flyers fan, but I was turned off by it. In the Anaheim section of the draft report, I wrote his real name.
William.
So he was William Ruel Gauthier. I don't want to give him just like I said, I'm petty like that.
Where does Cutter come from?
I don't know.
A little pretentious, I don't know.
All right, then you're William from now on.
Billy.
Willie Gauthier.
Willie G.
Yeah, I like that. Willie G. That is his new name on this podcast. Willie G.
But hey, social media, we have some influence there. Let's push it. Willie G.
Willie G.
Little Willie G trending next time they play.
Little Willie G.
Oh man. I don't want to make it more enemies.
All right, let's move forward to the rest of the draft here. These will probably be a little bit quicker because it's not the first pick in the draft. But Flyers did take a big centerman at number 51 in the second round with their second round pick. Jack Berglund, listed at 6'3", 209 pounds. I also saw him listed at 6'4". I don't know what's accurate at this point. He is listed as a center and a wing. I assume he's played both. I am going to butcher this name. Barkestad.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he played for their junior under 20 program for majority of the season, did have a cup of coffee in the SHL, had one goal.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about Jack? Seems to be, the Flyers, like you said, went center and they went big.
All right, so I watched a ton of Sweden this year, more so than I ever have, because I was just interested in it, and probably because they don't have any announcers in the games. So I just like the sounds of the arena. But he was a very impressive guy. He was the number one center for a playoff caliber team. Now, when the way the J20 works is when they have basically two regular seasons. The first half, it's regional, right? The South Division and the North Division. North Division is usually like, Skellefteå, Djurgården, Luleå, more, not more defense. It's just more defense oriented, I guess, whereas the South has Frölunda, Färjestad, and so Färjestad was very good during the regional divisional play, and then they went into the top 10 portion where they have to determine who the top seeds for the playoffs are. He was their number one center the whole season. Now they had a guy, Simon. No, I'm thinking of Rogel. I'm sorry. He was their number one center. So he when he played for Team Sweden though at the U18 level, because they had Linus Eriksson and Lucas Pettersson, he was basically a 3C. Sometimes he played wing. He was PK1. So I think because people usually see the tournaments more than the league play, they're like, oh, he's a checking center. And I know that even Flaw himself said we see him at this kid was a top line center for his team. He was their best player. They were thin on offense. They had a couple of exciting smaller guys I thought might get drafted, but they didn't. But he was very impressive. But what you get with him though is the size and the physicality and the defensive play. I don't want to say above everything else, but he was very prominent in that role as a top line center. So wins faceoffs, like ran the power play as a big guy. So the skating is not good. Okay. But he's nimble. So he could handle the puck in a one-on-one scenario. He could make a move. He delays. He could button hook. So like you don't see, and what I liked about him most, when you have this 200-foot style or this 200-foot dedication, if he gets the puck in the corner, his own corner, he can make a play. He could get the puck and he doesn't get nervous. He's not just slamming it out of the zone. He'll delay for a second. He could peel back. He has good hockey sense and vision to know that his defenseman is free behind the net. So reversals, like little IQ was a big thing to me. It was a huge deal. So I like the fact that when Briere was asked, maybe it was Flaw who said it. He said, when they said, what do you look for? He said, we look for IQ. He said speed. Obviously, speed doesn't apply really to Berglund. But, listen, this kid has the makings of a shutdown center, right? But not in a sense that he's completely, incapable of creating offense. So is it possible that he could become like a Philip Beested or like a Joel Eriksson-Ek, a big-bodied center who has the offensive ability? I'm not going to sell him short in that regard. I think that he could do it. He can. And Färjestad, I think they were a decent SHL team this year. When they promote kids like there weren't a whole lot of first-year eligibles that got promoted to the SHL. So maybe that's why people thought it was a weak crop. I didn't think it was a weak crop. We'll talk about the 2025 kids because that's special. But the fact that they called him up and he scored a goal, it's a big deal, but he's probably going to be a full-time SHL guy next year. I don't see him. And you know who's going to Färjestad next year? Solberg, the kid that Anaheim drafted that I thought the Flyers might be able to draft with their second first. But anyway, yeah, so he's a good pick. He was right in my range. I think I had him like in the somewhere like 54, 55.
Okay.
So fully support the pick. And now think about the Flyers did. They got a potential top 6 center and a potential middle 6 center. And like, again, it's just they complement the rest of the pool. And the good thing with Berglund, though, is you get development time. You get that, like they say, longer runway. Although I don't think he needs it. He could be in Sweden for a couple of years and you have to worry about the contract expiring.
I wonder if they would even potentially want to bring him over after this year, depending on the type of growth
he's physical
shows.
Too. He's a tough customer. He's a tough kid that, like Luchenko, just in different ways. He's a heavy kid. So like not like blowing dudes up in open ice, but if you watch him board battle, a shoulder send those little Swedish forwards flying. So it was a solid, smart need pick. Because if you look at the types of centers they have, well, I mean, they lost Lashinsky and what's his name, Marody. But like McLaughlin is a pure playmaker, right? But he's like kind of thin. He's got to put on muscle. Whereas Luchenko's a pure playmaker, but he's kind of like a bulldog, or like a tough a tough out. And now you got Berglund, who's like, all right, you could go and check the top line, or, just give us that depth where you could have two centers like Luchenko and Berglund. Again, this is all best case scenario playing
Sure.
where you match them up against different lines. And that, I like that kind of balance. So, obviously, in case you didn't know, I'm a big fan of the pick.
That's actually the type of pick I love in the second round, is a guy who I know can play really solid defense, really smart, and if he can put a game together and he's a legitimate third line, like a really good third line center, that's a huge win, because that's majority of what's taken in the second and third round, right? It's not the elite players.
Here's the thing, though, is like, again, he was a top line center as a first year draft eligible on a J20 playoff team. So although they were thin, and I'm sure there were graduations that weren't there, that maybe they were born in 03, 04, and that made the door wide open. And Foyestar was not good in the top 10 portion, and I think they got bounced early in the playoffs. But still, like, it's not like even Linus Eriksson, he was not Hugo Gardner's J20's top line center. Lucas Pettersson was for Modo, but they weren't a playoff team. So there's something to be said about that. I think that it often gets overlooked, that when you're a top line center and top PP and 20 minutes a game, because the player dev types will always say that they want to see these kids. They don't want to rush them to the AHL. They don't want to go from the draft to checking. They want them to start growing into roles that they want to see them in at the NHL level. And with a guy like Berglund and Luchenko, they've already checked that block. They're both top line centers who ran the power plays and penalty kills, top penalty killing guys.
Love that. Silly.
Yeah, I think for the Flyers, it's definitely another pick where they're trying to fill up that center position and add to their center depth in the prospect pool. Obviously, for Färjestad, he had a really good season, 31 points in 41 games here. Something that you mentioned, Steve, Joel Eriksson Ek, like I actually asked him at the draft, who do you compare yourself to? And he said Joel Eriksson Ek and, and Mikko Rantanen. So I thought that was really interesting to hear that, because those guys are obviously, I don't think he's ever going to be anywhere near the level of Rantanen in terms of the scoring potential. But Eriksson Ek's really an interesting comparison. I think, that's something that you could definitely see occur for sure. And just in terms of, his type of play and things like that, he seems like a, two-way type of player overall package. Like I asked him as well, is there any one skill that you would say that stands out? And he said his physicality, obviously, but he said he considers himself to be a 200-foot player and an all-around player where not one exact skill is going to like pop out on the page, but he does a lot of the little things right and, a lot of different things well. And then I thought this was interesting too. We got some insight from the Flyers, from the director of European scouting, Joachim Grunberg, and this is what he had to say about the pick. He said, obviously a big centerman with really good hockey sense. We like the work ethic and character of the player, and we also think he has a good skill set and his ability to make plays. He plays both ways and is good defensively. Skating will have to improve, but we've worked worth skaters through it, and we're confident that we're going to be able to help him get that part of his game to the next level. So
it's like pretty much exactly what Steve said.
Yeah, exactly.
Good, credence to that. Honestly, if this guy ends up being like a 50, again, I'm just throwing out a number, a 50-point player who's playing against better players in the league and can be two-way, I think it's a humongous win. My interest in this guy, because we're listening to Flyers media kind of react, and a lot of people are like, oh, we're not high on Berglund.
And his father, too, was an NHLer.
Christian Berglund was a Devils draft pick. Yeah. So he has that. Yeah. And that always helps.
Yeah. But there's a lot of people who are kind of down on the Flyers draft pick. But I always say, look, I don't care if you took the best player in the draft. I want you to hit. Like, I want the guy to play in the NHL. I want him to be an impactor, especially.
Yeah, well, again, when we talked about this, at worst, he's in the AHL and he's a tough guy to play against in practice. He, you know what I mean? So, like, like Ryan Poehling, when he was in his draft year, we thought he was a potential number one center. He had a hat trick in his first NHL game.
Right.
We saw him play at the Hlinka back in 2016. I'm like, this kid is fantastic. And he was a first round pick and it didn't really develop, but look what he became. He reinvented himself. Same thing. I don't know if you guys remember, again, dating myself, Bobby Carpenter. He was like a third overall pick. A high schooler drafted out of the, I think it was like Beverly High School in Massachusetts in the early 80s, scored 50 goals with the Capitals, and like one of the youngest guys to do so. and he never reached his potential. They traded him within a couple of years. Within a matter of, I would say, 7 years post-draft, right? Everybody was calling him a bust. He became one of the top checking centers in the NHL. He was a top checking center for the Bruins. And the Bruins used him to match up against Messier in the 1990 Cup. So that, again, like these things, you have to, there's nothing wrong with a player being considered a checker or like whatever, you know what I mean? Especially if they have that offensive ability, it's a lot easier for them to go from that role to whatever. But with Berglund is he has skill. He scored some nice goals at the tournaments too. Like he made nice plays at the tournament. So that probably played into the Flyers being high on him. But
you know who this reminds me of that used to play for the Flyers at one point? Michael Handzus, who is very slow.
He was big. He was huge.
He was huge, but he was slow, but he was effective on both ends of the ice.
Yeah. I mean, he's there's more like pop to Berglund's game, I think. I mean, I think the skating thing, he's like, we'll talk about skating with one of the other picks later.
I mean, I heard that about Forrester, and I even talked to his skating coach. I had him on here.
Aesthetically, it's fine. I mean, it doesn't look.
Sometimes it can get overblown, like you said, Steve. Right? They're trying to pick apart a negative in the game.
They just got to find something wrong with it.
And I heard too. Like I was talking.
Someone was asking at the press conferences, like, "Can you comment on his skating? Can you comment on his skating?" I'm like, Jesus, they're really obsessed about the skating.
I was asking at the draft, like some of the daily face-off, like the scouting guys that work for them, and one of the guys I was asking was saying, "I really love Berglund. Like I saw him play for Farstead. And one of the games he was getting a hat trick and looked like a dynamite player." So sometimes it gets overblown, right? Some of the negatives.
Plus, you're drafting kids. You're drafting what you hope they can work on, and like you said, develop, and they're pieces to be molded in a way, right, for themselves a lot of times, to mold their own game. So
I mean, look at Austin Matthews, man. He is slowed down. He is not fast, right?
I didn't even think about that.
Deceptively quick, right? But he's shifty. He's powerful balance. But I mean, you see him like blowing by people in open ice. No, I mean, but that's just one obviously extreme example. But no, Berglund is a guy that will check a lot of blocks. But I agree 100% with the playmaking, the vision, and the IQ. I mean, like the IQ is a big deal. He comes from a hockey family that probably played a little bit into it, but the fact that the team trusted him, Färjestad, with the key situations, plural. You're not a guy that's like, oh, all he does is do this and just put him there anyway because we want him to get drafted high. That's not how it works.
Yeah. So let's go on to the second round pick. Another big boy, 6'4", right-handed defenseman Spencer Gill. He came out of the Rimouski Oceanic. Sidney Crosby's old team there. Had really good numbers. I don't know too much about him beyond just the statistics, and obviously he's been on dev camp a little bit, but what can you tell us about Gill?
He was a riser. He had some advantages before the draft, and that his brother was drafted by Tampa Bay, but in a later round. So Rimouski, it was a weird season for them because they had a longtime coach and they got rid of him, or I forgot if he walked away, but they had a first-year head coach. Now, Gill in his draft -1 was a good, serviceable, more like stay at home. The few times I watched him, you're like, it's nondescript. Okay. So I didn't consider him a potential first or second round pick, maybe even a third round pick. I thought he'd be like his brother, like fourth, fifth, sixth. But with the new coach, you wanted to see maybe this coach would promote more offense. So he had a great start. Now, Central Scouting on it, they watched this, gave him a C grade. So that's basically like what I said, like a middle to late round pick. But he got off to a really good start, and then he never slowed down. And so when I was preparing for the CHL Top Prospects game, I always look at the stats to see, all right, well, who do I need to track that I'm not following? And usually the first thing, you just go to the point producers first to see, is it fool's gold, or is it really like. So he was a guy that was really maturing in terms of his play away from the puck. That you look at the highlight clips, they'll show him scoring goals. That's fine. But his decision making and puck handling was mature. Like he was like, so they leaned on him a lot. He played in all situations. I wouldn't call him a smothering shutdown guy, but then he goes to the top prospects game and he looked really, really good at that game. There was a lot of, we have all these high profile defensemen like Dickinson, like Yakimchuk, like Perek, but he and I think Ben Danford and Colton Roberts probably like just pushed the narrative even further to the right that they were potential higher round picks because of how well they played in that game. And then Rimouski, because they were a playoff team, I think they didn't make the playoffs the year before. Now the games were more meaningful. He was seeing expanded ice time, expanded role, and he carried that all the way through. I did not rank him, though, in my top 100 because I felt like, I don't obsess with size, but I knew his season, his play, the role he had, top pairing, the CHL top prospect thing, getting picked for Team Canada at the U18 Worlds, although he was kind of like, just steady Eddie, safe type stuff. They had other defensemen to do all the offensive. So I was just like, you know what? I still got to be skeptical a little bit because of, he had this great season, but he wasn't that, like, let's say it was a jump. So when there's always a jump and not like a steady progression, I always have to be like, is that just extra motivation to get drafted? Or did he really just have a bad season? Or like, so I'm always skeptical sometimes of guys like that. So I wasn't that high on him, but I would say that he definitely jumps Matteo Mann in the pipeline. Southern is, had a really nice draft +1, but I think with Gill's draft year was better than Southern's draft year. Because he was more of a complete player, less risk, less mistake prone. So now you're looking at potentially the number 2 defense prospect in the pipeline. And I'm not going to count Helga Grands. I don't know, but people, and even Ronnie Adder, because who's going to call him a prospect anymore? So this was a good pick. Not my pick. I think one thing about the decision was, remember that they traded, I think they traded 2/3 to Nashville to make that pick, right? Because they had
exactly.
They were supposed to go into the draft with presumably 2 picks, but Columbus didn't tell them the answer until the last minute. So they kept the Jay O'Brien compensatory pick, and they were going to have, I think, 2/3. I think it was the Kings and the Blue Jackets, right? With the thirds, maybe.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say they traded the Minnesota pick they picked up in the Lachenko trade, and they traded.
Yes, okay, that's it.
Pick.
Very good, very good. Okay, so there was their own third and the Minnesota pick. I actually wrote that down. It's right here. They traded the 77th pick and a 2025 third.
Yeah,
their own to Nashville for this pick. So they clearly liked him, but I think what may have triggered that, maybe. And this is just my speculation, they might have been interested in drafting Linus Eriksson, who was on the board still. And he may have been, if they like Berglund, they definitely liked freaking Linus Eriksson. Maybe he was the pick afterward, but he went 58. So that might have triggered. Again, this is just my speculation. The way my mind works sometimes with the draft. But even still, it's a need pick, I think. Definitely not best player available in my book, but a need pick that you have closer to a defensive defenseman with mobility and IQ and breakout ability. The goal scoring and the shot creativity is the added bonus.
Yeah, I'll say this too. Just like Luchenko, he's an August 17th birthday. He's also 17 years old. Also,
he might not be done growing.
Yeah, exactly. So I think for the Gill pick, it was interesting. Obviously, one staple of his game that even he was mentioning is his breakouts, like his first pass. He has a good first pass. I asked him about a comparable. He said he tries to mold his game after Alex Pietrangelo. So interesting in terms of that. And then I had some insight from one of the Flyers scout, Martin Gendron, on the Gill pick, and he was saying that he's a tall, lanky right shot defenseman who's 6'4". We did like the projection with him. He's got a great first pass. He sees the ice well and can create offense at the blue line. So, some offense in transition. And then one interesting thing that the Flyers also mentioned is Sam Morin's in the Quebec area, and they're planning to get Sam Morin to work with him closely, apparently, as he develops. So I thought that was very interesting.
You want to
With
see him
Morin,
play a little bit meaner.
with Morin being a big defenseman like that, I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, he was not, he wasn't not physical. Like he was physical in spurts, but
for his size, should be more, right?
I'd like to see him. I wanted to see him. This was a knock on him. He wasn't mean in his crease net front defense. I wanted to see him be more meaner. It seemed like he was making a point, and which is fair. He made a point to avoid screening the goalie because he's a big guy. But sometimes, like in the crease, you got to send a message. And the Quebec League was weird this year because it wasn't as physical as it really wasn't physical. Like it seems like they're devolving, where they're not even playing and it took fighting out. So maybe that's part of it. They're stricter with the rules. So maybe that's why Gill wasn't as active with his stick, even illegally. But so that's something that you want to consider because the Flyers, you want to have a tough Tortorella. He wants his guys in the crease, send a message, defend on net. I think he could do it, but the breakout again, it compensates for a lack of, let's say, anger and aggression in like the tight spaces.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm interested to see how he evolves as well. I like that he's young. I feel like the Flyers kind of went for that in this draft. It's trying to find guys who, have a mold as much as they are defined players. All right, let's move on to round 4, where the Flyers had their next pick. This was an interesting pick and an interesting name that I'm going to definitely butcher. Heikki
Ruohonen.
Ruohonen.
Oh, yeah.
Ruohonen. Yeah, so 18 years old, played for Kiekko Espoo. Yep. So it seems to be somewhat of an offensive defenseman, 20 goal or offensive player, 20 goals, 27 assists in 37 games. What can you tell us about it?
All right, so this is another reason why my speculation was the Eriksson pick was because they traded up. They traded 2 picks to get this kid, and it's a high 4th round because they didn't have a 4th heading into the draft. So they traded
5th and 6th.
5th and 6th to get him. It's a good trade. It's a trade of 5th and a 6th to go up high in the 4th round. Now the 5th round pick that Calgary took was Luke Misa. He was one of my top kids. He fell because of his size. So keep an eye on that. But what I liked about this kid Ruohonen is he is a tough competitor. He's thick. He's sturdy. I always expected him to be more of a pass first playmaker because for some reason, like his skating's posture and the very strong stick handler, but he's definitely a shooter and a finisher, and he can finish in a bunch of ways. So Kiekko Espoo, I think they were a playoff caliber team. He was their top line center. So again, what's the trend? Luchenko, top line center. Berglund, top line center. Gill, top pair defenseman. Ruohonen for his team, top line center. And he had a line mate, Elias Poulin, Nani, whatever. He should have been drafted too. The 2 of them together caused havoc. They both had size. They both had speed, good speed. I'm not going to say that Ruohonen is a speed burner, but his mechanics look really good when he skated. But what I really liked about him was just the chip and chase, and he gets in on the forecheck. And the poor Finnish defenseman. They were really good Finnish defensemen in the SM Sargent this year, but he almost had his way with them. Some inconsistency. You didn't see it every shift. But he could be a tank, like for real. Now he's going to Harvard.
6'2", 205.
At 17 years old.
Yeah.
He might, I don't know if he's a late birthday. When's his birthday?
June. So he just turned 18.
Just turned 18. So, but he's going to Harvard. Okay. So that's the other thing is like when do these Finnish kids have gone to BU, they've gone to the NCHC, they go to the USHL. We've seen that. I remember a Finnish kid, a high-end Finnish kid, not high-end. I mean, he played for Team Finland at tournaments. He was like more like their middle six, right? Because it was always what's his name? The kid that I wanted the Flyers to draft, Hellenius.
Yeah.
Hellenius, and then maybe Atos Koivu was the 2C. So he was like a 3C. Sometimes they might even use them on wing. But he's going to go to Harvard. I don't know when he's going to report. So he might be in the SM. Actually, no,
I think it was 2026 or something.
All right, so he can play in the SM Sarja then. He can. The SM Liga. The same thing with like the Tuomisto kid, the Red Wings pick. He can't play in the pro leagues because he'll lose his eligibility. I'm pretty sure that's the rule. So he might come to the USHL, or he'll stay in the U20 SM Sarja. But another kid I was high on, I had him going around I think I had him in like the 60s, maybe the late 60s. So good value. But now you have three different types of centers. Yeah. You have a pure playmaker who's fast. You have a playmaker type with skill who's a good checker. And now you have a physical, and then Berglund's physical too, but now you have a physical, mobile, agile finishing center. So it seems like that was the intent. That was the strategy in the draft. That's my interpretation.
No, you're spot on, Steve.
Spot on, yeah.
Yeah, because you look at all the centers that they drafted, first of all, and then they're all, different types of centers, different skill sets. And we even talked about it in our pre-show that what does this prospect pool really lack? And it's centers. And it looks like they were looking to specifically address that. And you're also spot on with the USHL and then jumping to Harvard. When we talked to Brent Flair at the draft, the assistant GM, he said he was taking a non-typical path in development for a Finnish player. So next year he is going to go to the USHL.
Yeah.
And from there, he's going to go to Harvard. So it's definitely interesting because a lot of Finns don't really do that. So it'll be interesting to see how he develops kind of going to the USHL then. Into the NCAA.
He will fit right in. He'll fit in the USHL. He'll fit in the ECAC. Yeah. Harvard's never been. Pretty sure Ted Donato still coaches there. If you guys remember, Ted Donato was a hardworking, gritty kind of a checking. I think he was a center. Yeah, Ted Donato was center. So it's going to be a good mentor to have, because I think Ruohonen does have the ability to be a checker and be a 200-foot type and kill penalties. His face-offs, I think, were pretty good too. I might be mistaken. I might be confusing with somebody else. But he plays a heavy game. He is. If you watch him in the corners, he'll be the first one in on the forecheck. Not all the time, but if he is, it's going to be a battle. He'll battle in front of the net. He'll battle behind the net. And it's just a thick frame. So that is going to be like a North American style through and through. So I think I agree with the development path, because not that he couldn't have developed nicely in, let's say, Finland, but the fact he's going USHL, ECAC defensive style conference in college, I think it'll be pretty good for him.
It seems like there's your Scott Lawton kind of comparison. More
and I wanted to add one thing too, like Sami Kapanen's always all over like the Finnish leagues and scouting for the Flyers, so I think it's probably like a Sami Kapanen type influence pick.
Yeah.
And then the Flyers amateur European scout Sammy Sandell said this about the pick. He said he's a strong build, good size, two-way centerman with good offensive abilities. He works very, very hard, and he's very smart, and he's a good skater for his size. So a lot of what you essentially said, Steve.
Yeah.
So let's go on to the next pick. And this is a really interesting pick. Noah Powell, who was passed over in last year's draft. So he's 19 years old. Really good size, 6'2", 201 pounds, right winger, played in the U.S. Hockey League, had 43 goals, 31 assists, 74 points, plus 18 in 61 games. Seems to be a late riser type of situation, or at least a late bloomer type of situation. And Vasili, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the player that is deaf.
He's hearing impaired, but
so
issues for him.
Yeah, which is really interesting that he's also hearing impaired. And
that makes sense. That I was going to comment about something that he does. I'm going to say he's a great on-ice communicator. He's always using his stick to like direct traffic. That's amazing. That's amazing.
It's really cool. Dude. I never knew that, obviously, but to hear him do that,
I'm like, he's so demonstrative with his stick. He's always pointing like pass to this point, especially on the power play. Very interesting.
Yeah. So, what can you tell us about Powell? Seems like you've already followed.
Well, listen, I got to be honest. Okay, the skating is the only knock.
I heard that.
It's really the only knock. It is not good. And the one thing that I didn't like, I mean, he was the USHL's leading goal scorer.
Yeah,
I believe so. Yeah.
He was a power play specialist. His work around the net is phenomenal. So it's not like he's like the one-timer option, feed him pucks. Yeah, he could do that, but he scored a lot of goals right in that little, like right near the blue paint, right below the hashes. And a lot of his goals, well, at least the ones that I saw, were from turnovers that he created with his stick. His own stick. Like he's got a quick, I guess, hand-eye coordination where he, the puck is loose in a danger area. What's the first thing the defenseman wants to do? He wants to get rid of it. Powell, he lift up the stick and he takes it, and he can finish right off the bat. So he was a top line guy. The kid Paulson. This is why I get so mad at what I do. I've been telling that could have got drafted 2 years ago with HV 71, and the teams passed on him, and then they wait until he's a double overager in the USHL because scoring was through the roof. It was also through the roof in Sweden, but I guess people said, "Oh, we don't know yet." Well, anyway, he played in the same line with Paulson, same power play, and there was good chemistry there. The only knock beyond the skating, though, is that he doesn't move around that much. So although he's active to a degree, he's usually the one guy that is not moving as much as he should. And I don't know if it's by design. He does it in all three zones. I'm not going to call it lazy because he when the puck is near him, he's very engaged. And like I said, the quick stick comes in handy. You trust him in the neutral zone to handle the puck. He's got soft hands, but the skating package, every single piece of it has to be developed. It definitely does. So maybe the only thing I would say, forget about foot speed, just be more active, have a little bit more, not explosiveness, but maybe just have some more oomph in your first step and your reaction timing, starting and stopping, right? Like reacting, spinning away, facing the puck. Like I didn't see a whole lot of that, but he didn't do that, and he scored 40 something goals. So, and he's only a 1 year overager.
Yeah.
So
early birthday, February. So I guess early in the year.
So I don't think he's committed yet to college.
Ohio State University.
Oh, he did. He is committed.
Yeah,
oh God, I see it on the USHL website. All right, so Ohio State. All right, so Big Ten is physical. I mean, he'll fit right in that, but I don't know who they're going to have as their center. I don't know if he'll be PP1 right off the bat. Maybe he might even be another year in the USHL because. But I gotta check the commitment page to see if he's heading there next season. Is that what they're saying?
Yeah, it's for next season. Yeah, so he'll be with Ohio
all right.
State.
So it's going to be that's going to be a good litmus test
to see how he does.
Speed against college-age defensemen, 23, 24 sometimes. Not so much in the Big Ten because they have prospects, like recent draft prospects. But yeah, I mean, not my pick. He wasn't in my top like 100 or 50 or even 200. He might have been on Central Scouting's rankings. But I think at the end of the day, the power play, like he is really, really good on the power play, not just in scoring goals, but keeping possessions alive. And he's a good battler and work ethic. So skating, yeah, this is a time where it is a big deal. It is a big deal. It's really, but
seems like a coachable player though with potential upside. Elite Prospects actually ranked him as 77th overall.
Interesting.
McKean's had him at 148 and Dauber had him at 124, and he wasn't ranked by the others. So
okay.
I don't care about them, what they do.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, Powell, to me, at least I haven't really seen any of him, but I mean, it sounds like a prototypical type power forward, good close to the net, stuff like that. Like we got some insight from Shane Fukushima. So he's one of the amateur scouts for the Flyers. He said their insight and why they really drafted him was big, powerful forward that can shoot the puck, led the USHL in goals with 43, as we know. Plays with grit and bite and plays a heavy game down low. Has the ability to shoot the puck, but get around the net and score goals in a lot of different ways. So.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Listen, if you want to call it a neat pick, reactionary draft, be my guest, because when you have the worst power play in franchise in a row, you take these chances. So I'm again, not my kid. There was obviously players that I would have recommended. European kids specifically. Was Justin Poirier still not Justin? It's Justin Poirier. Was he still on the board?
I believe so. Yeah.
Well, he was a smaller guy, so maybe the Flyers like the size.
It's like Zetterberg, I think, it wasn't taken in the end, and I think
that was sad. That was so
another small guy, right?
He's going to be you. He's going to be you. So that's a guy to keep an eye on. Not to veer off the subject, but Zetterberg is going to be you. Maybe knowing he knew that teams were knocking his size, that he's gonna pack on muscle, being he's 5'7". So but yeah, I mean, even Carolina didn't take a chance on him, and they always draft players like that. So I feel bad. He was a first rounder for me. I took a shot on him. It didn't work out, but
even Kiviharu, right, dropped like tremendously. Obviously, had the issues.
The health of his knee, and he lost a lot of quickness. You got to give him a chance to bounce back. But yeah, well, that was the trade down.
Minnesota, I believe.
Yeah, someone traded down. Was it Buffalo? I think was the one, or Boston traded down, and Minnesota by trading up.
Exactly.
Kiviharu. So that might have been.
You said that they're looking for elite defensemen.
So and it's funny because he said to Garrett and Kiviharu actually on the draft floor that thanks for making me the steal of the draft. Which is cocky for a kid to say that. But
all right, I love to see it. I hate when they do it every time. Brendan Lemieux said that teams are going to regret drafting me in the second round. Like, dude, no,
didn't happen.
When they say that, it never. NFL, NBA
never pans out that way.
Teams are going to regret passing on me. Like, that's when the scouts are like, no, the scouts were pretty much right. Like,
yeah, that's like Shane Wright, right? Where he had that iconic moment where he says he didn't give a dirty look.
That was weird. That was weird.
Canadians, but
I don't care. But he's actually developing nicely. But Seattle's got a center, so he's gonna have.
But they were right to not take him first overall. That's all.
Well, yeah. I mean, Slavkovsky just got the big freaking contract. Right? Did not get the big contract. So
I mean, I thought that was a little crazy, but that's a different conversation. Even though I like him. So, all right. Next round, this was 6th round pick. Another right winger. This time not huge. 5'11", 168 pounds, 18-year-old. Ilya Platov played in the MHL. Had really good numbers, point per game in the MHL. Seems like there's some potential here. What can you tell us about him?
Another trend. What's the trend? Top line player, right? Every player picked was either a top defenseman or a top line player. So Krasnaya Armia or Siska 2, Red Army, Siska's junior team, they're usually a powerhouse. They're always a powerhouse, especially in the MHL, right? So they are grouped in. They're always grouped in with the SKA 1946s, the local Yaroslavls, the Dynamo MSKs. Those are like the big four. And for some reason, I mean, I really didn't study it enough, but they were rebuilding this year. That they had a really young team. They had some big names, right? Like Velikov was a guy that we thought would be a potential. He scored his first MHL goal when he was like 15. So we thought, he's going to be a first round pick in 2024. But for the most part, this was a young team, and they didn't have a good year, and they were one and done in the playoffs, the play-in round. They didn't even make it to the real play-in. But he was a top line right wing, and he was also on Russia's U18 team. So if there was a Helenka, if they played in the Helenka, if they played in the U18 World Championships or the February 5 Nations like they used to, he would have been a top 6 guy for them. So dynamic skill. I know that word's getting thrown out a lot, but if you watch him play, he is a phenomenal offensive talent. And I say phenomenal that he is like literally when you watch him and you stay watching him because he could do all types of zigzagging, carrying the puck through the zone, inside, outside, scores in a bunch of ways. So he was on the top line. The center was a kid named Frolov, who I thought should have got drafted, but he was the pass-first playmaker through and through. Now, Frolov is a 200-foot type. Both these kids were smaller, though. I like smaller, like 5'10", 5'11". I hate saying that. I'm 5'11 and a half. I keep saying, he's small, 5'11. But anyway, the line was really, they had to face all the tough matchups, and they played, 17, 18, 19 minutes a game, whatever it was. PP won. And then with the Russian team, they were also line mates again. So, there's like the chemistry may have played into it. The familiarity, always have the same center, but they fed it off each other. The playmaker versus the finisher. But Palatov is not a pure finisher. He is as good of a playmaker as he is a finisher, and to an extent, I'd put him on Frolov's level as a playmaker. So, but the one thing with him is when you have that much dynamism, that much excitability, that much skill, like legit skill, puck skill, think of like a Patrick Kane, like with the way stick handles and whatever. Again, no, he's not Patrick Kane. I'm saying think of like that type of display. And you're the top line guy. There's always the pressure of I got to deliver. So because of that, there were plenty of games where now I didn't see a game where and I didn't watch every game, but when I did watch him, I never saw a game that he took off, that he wasn't noticeable. It's just that sometimes he could be a little bit too much borderline hot dog-ish with the puck. So this is a high yield potential pick. I had him ranked in my top 100, but he was definitely, I put him in the draft report. And I was very excited when the Flyers got him, because I felt that Powell was like, if you switched it, if they drafted Powell before Powell, I would have went nuts, because very excited about him. But this is a great value pick, and he's a kid that, because it's Russia, you let him stay there. But I'm guessing at some point the stupid IIHF is going to buckle and do the right thing and let Russia back into these tournaments.
I hope
it's depriving us. It's depriving us as fans.
Yeah,
watching
exactly.
these kids play. And I think the scouts are probably fed up. Like, dude, some teams, they'll go scout Russia, no problem. But that was the narrative, and a lot of Russian kids did not get drafted this year that should have been drafted. The excuse that we can't see them, well, if you let them play in the tournaments, you could freaking see them. And I mean, listen, you're not promoting an occupation. You're not legitimizing an act of aggression. You're literally being able to scout kids who can make you money in the long run. It never made sense to me. But yeah, obviously I like the pick.
Yeah, I hate that they're doing that with the tournament. So I will say I think it's part of the reason the Flyers were able to get Michkov, because of that. Because he didn't get to compete against his peers. So paid off for us in the short term, I guess. But I hate it as well. I hope it ends. Vasili, sorry.
Yeah, it seems like a very high ceiling, like a swing type pick. Like if he hits, like he has that skill where he could be, upper type of the lineup type player, obviously. Just from what I kind of researched into him, the puck handling, the playmaking specifically, and then the elusive skating are really the three traits that probably stand out.
He's elusive, right?
Yeah, so when you add that into it, I mean, why not take a shot at him or on him in the 6th round, right? Because if he hits, it's going to look like a great pick. So
I also don't think that he's a pure finesse. I think that like he has some bite to him, like in corners and against the wall. Like I think he had no choice because the team was thin on scoring.
Yeah,
he couldn't just wait for his line mate to do the work. So I wouldn't call him a perimeter player. I wouldn't call him a finesse player. Like this is something that eventually you're going to see him add even more strength, muscle, and he'll be tougher on the puck. But he could break out on his own, man. He really can. Like he'll win a battle in his own end. But don't call him a 200-foot forward because I don't think he is. I mean, no.
He's a guy I think I'd like to see in the AHL maybe in a couple years, and brought up through the
He'll
system.
probably be. Ciska probably doesn't want to let him go. I'm going to be honest with you. Like for a while, they probably want to keep him, at least have him play in the KHL a couple of years.
That makes a bunch.
That's my speculation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Off topic, but did you see Nikita Gusev was at the New Jersey Devils camp?
No, I didn't, but that's interesting.
Interesting,
right?
Didn't he lead the K last year in scoring?
Yeah, he did. 89.
That was a talk about it. Fool me once. I mean that did not work. I was so excited about that, and I'm not even a Devils fan. That was supposed to be
like the next Kaprizov situation.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
did not work out.
No.
He went right back to Russia and was like, I made the right decision. So, yeah,
maybe second chances. All right, let's get to our last guy. This was the Flyers' 7th round pick. Austin Moline, I believe that's how you say his name. 6'4", 194 pounds, right-handed defenseman. Played for a prep school.
Yeah.
8 goals, 27 points, 35. I'm sorry, 27 assists, 35 points in 57 games. Seems to be like a two-way defenseman type of guy. Again, seems like another swing. Maybe hoping they found a second Gill in the draft type of situation. What can you tell us?
I know that he was on Central Scouting's rankings. This was more like, I hate to say this, and I can never prove this, but this, I think, was a pick that was, let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
Because a Shattuck St. Mary is a freaking prep school wagon, but it's a prep school wagon.
Yeah.
They beat up so many teams this year. It was really hard for me to watch them. I'm going to be honest with you. And I don't want to marginalize guys like Will Zellers and Colin Ralph, who's phenomenal, and even Malign and some other guys, is that like the competition is just not the same as the USHL. It's not the same as even Minnesota high school, like class 2A. You know what I mean? Like it lacks this extra gear. It lacks the meanness and the toughness, but the elite of the elite in this group, and a lot of these kids move on to the USHL.
He's going the BCHL and then the NCAA Northern Michigan.
He's going to the BCHL. Okay, not bad. He's all right. But like there was so many lopsided games in this circuit that it was hard for me to gauge Letourneau. It was hard for me to gauge Ralph. I had to go by the couple of USHL games that they played. So this kid was not a number one. He was not a number two. He's the exception to this draft class. He was more like a 3 or a 4. Wasn't PP1. I don't think he was PK1, but he might have been PK2. And he just, it was hot or cold every shift that I saw. Hot or cold. Good versus bad. Bad versus good. So the execution part has to get fixed. The thinking, the thought process, the way he sees the ice, I didn't mind it. Retrieval's okay, not bad. Skating, not bad. Pretty mobile, but the execution piece, right? Like if you're going to pass it to the guy, like you got to hit on your pass if it's going to go D to D. His gap, inconsistent gap sometimes. You guys would freaking. So the few games I watched of his were against the better teams, like the St. Andrews College. What was the other one? Northwood Prep, Culver Academy, the military school. And, so this is definitely, I think he's going to go to Northern Michigan.
Yeah. Next, not this upcoming season, the following.
All right. So Northern Michigan is an interesting story because they had a great goalie prospect coming in Hampton Slukinski. And his brother Grant is a really good center. And it was good. They were like huge recruiting boons for the program. But the head coach Potolny left to coach Hartford in the AHL. He got a huge bump to go to coach the Rangers team. And who coached Hartford last year? Freaking Knobloch, the guy that took the Oilers to the Stanley Cup. So when he left, those two players left. I think they went over to Western Michigan, which is a more prominent program. So I don't know when he's going to go to Northern Michigan, but they got hit hard by losses in recruiting. So it's going to be a new coach. I don't know what to expect. I don't know if he was recruited by somebody else, if he was recruited by Potolny, and he'll follow like the other two and go to a new program. But this is a raw pick. I never watched. I only watched him a handful of times, but never came away like that kid is going to be a freaking star.
Fair enough.
Now, there is something unique about him, though. He's from Vegas.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it wasn't like he was born in 2017. So he's just from Vegas and when they didn't have a team. And I don't know where he was trained thereafter, but size, mobility, IQ is pretty good. Everything else, though, long-term work in progress.
He seems like a long shot.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely seems like a project type pick where, like, if it all hits and you put it together, maybe like a bottom.
This might have been, and I hate to do this. Sometimes teams, when they pick this late, they do one of their regional scouts a favor.
Yeah.
Maybe they've neglected him and they do him a favor and they ask him to take a kid. There were a lot of BCHL kids I would have taken. Luke McGinnis would have been a great pick. A physical. Remember we talked about him?
Yeah, we did.
Physical, mobile, big open ice hitter from the left side. So at least you could say like he brings this element with Moline. I don't know what he really brings. Just steadiness, I guess, but it's got to be coached and enhanced.
Definitely looks like the frame was a big part of it. And I mean, it's good for the kid just to see him get drafted in Vegas. His family,
absolutely. Yeah,
his family was there.
He put in the work.
There, and they were ecstatic. Like you heard them yelling in the crowd when he got drafted. Well, it's awesome to see that, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And again, I've been wrong when I've said I've done stuff like this. He definitely is not like a do not draft.
Yeah.
And it's just that the program itself was very hard. It's very hard to watch that program and look at the depth kids because the top end kids are always so extremely top end. You know what I mean? Where they could easily play in the USHL and be like a middle pairing or a top six guy. But in this situation, he was a depth guy there was a lot of things involved. So, you know, I would say trust the Flyers on this one, but you know, like Jack Bodine would have been a good pick. Right shot defenseman from Malmo. No, Arebro J20, who played on the Swiss U18 team and one of the biggest open ice hitters and punishing hitters, defensive defenseman.
Yeah.
But you know, they kind of got the one thing I'll say about this. They only drafted 2 defensemen. I'm surprised they didn't address the power play with the defenseman, even a guy with size, right?
I think the addition of Jamie Drysdale kind of gives them a little bit.
Yeah, but Drysdale was drafted 4 years ago. You know what I mean? Or
yeah, fair enough. You didn't add to the prospect pool for a defense
like
that
on the right side, specifically the right side. If you want to do the lefty right, because there is like Andrea, the guys. But I thought that would be a requirement. Yeah, apparently, it wasn't.
Because Bonk is not necessarily a pure offensive guy either, too, right? He's more of a.
He could be though. He could be. But again, defense heavy draft to see them not address that, I thought was a little interesting, but not the end of the world, of course.
Yeah.
They definitely went, if you look at like the overall draft and just the trends for me, they definitely went with trying to build that center depth up. Yeah. Like you said, guys that played in top line roles all across the draft. So guys are getting a lot of minutes, chances to develop. And then also size, right? They drafted a ton of guys with size, and even this pick included. So yeah.
All right. So let's get on to the 2025 preview. We'll do that, and then we'll talk a little bit about free agency here at the end because we are going long, obviously, because we always go long when you're on here, Steve. Because
that's okay. It's more fun that way. What do you mean, Yariv?
Yeah. So, okay. So the reason we want to talk, just for those listening, the reason we want to talk about 2025, this is, from all what I understand, Steve, is that this is a very strong draft coming up next year.
It's good, yeah.
Yeah, the Flyers currently have 3 first-round picks. One, their personal first-round pick, which we don't know where exactly it's going to be, but let's be honest, between 15, maybe even as low as 5. We don't really know. We'll talk about that a little bit in free agency, but the Metro division definitely got better in some sense. And it's, you know, I don't think the Flyers are necessarily under the illusion that they're a playoff team. And even if they are, they're clearly not showing that in free agency. They've kind of been planning around this draft for a little bit. They mentioned it since Briere has become a GM. Having 3 first-round picks and 3 second-round picks does allow them to be aggressive if needed as well. They tried this year to move up into the top 5. I don't think they were that serious about it. I think they always were kind of thinking 2025. And that's why I want to give people a little bit of a preview, because I think the Flyers are kind of going to be very aggressive in this upcoming draft. And probably will not be taking all 6 picks, assuming that they don't land a top 5 pick in this draft. And I could see them packaging the move up. So obviously you don't need to give us a complete rundown here, but maybe just tell us about some of the top guys that we should be looking forward to.
All right, so the 2025 draft is definitely going to be forward heavy. You're not going to see, there are a lot of good defensemen, but the thing is now that we've realized the NHL is leaning towards size and trending towards size. some of the kids we thought were elite for this draft on the smaller side, like Banak, the Czech kid, we got to push him down a little bit to an extent because, it's just if the first round kids are drafted in the first round, they're going to get this like special attention and they're going to be pushed to give them more a longer leash. So if whether the kid's bigger or small, it doesn't matter. So I think next year you'll see the size trend continue. Now, one thing that we do have, unlike last year, I think that James Higgins, unlike Celebrini or Cole Iserman, I think James Higgins ended any doubt whatsoever that he's the consensus number one pick for next season, right? Center out of the NTDP. He was their top line center. He broke the scoring record at the U18 World Championships.
Just crazy.
And that was, I think, Kucherov's record.
Yeah.
Right? So that automatically, nobody else can compare that. And if you want to take it a step further, Celebrini played technically in the USHL in this draft -1. He also played at the U18 Worlds. And he didn't produce like friggin' – he produced on a very high level, but Higgins performed at a, beyond Jack Hughes and, well, kind of like Jack Hughes. So as of right now, the general feeling is that it's the Higgins draft, but there are definitely 3 or 4 guys, I would say at least 2, who could challenge him, maybe even 3 and 4, depending on how it all unfolds. But they're all forwards. I don't think we're going to see any defensemen. Maybe one in the top 5 because the Schaefer kid out of Erie in the OHL is really good. Not a big point producer, but in terms of everything you'd want in a modern day NHL defenseman. But the forwards are going to, I think, dominate the top 10. So after Higgins, Higgins is going to go to Boston College. He'll be there probably one and done. But after him, I think you got a Russian kid named Ivan Ryabkin. He plays for Dynamo Moscow. He's a lot like Higgins, and he's a lot like Demidov. He's like a mixture of Higgins and Demidov, but he plays with anger. So he's not very big, but he actually has the ability to have a physical element where he he'll hit guys after the whistle. You'll see him jostling with guys at the opening face-off. So dynamic, phenomenal skill. And he, too, was on Russia's U18 team. He was their top-line center as a draft -1. So then you have Anton Frondel, who everybody loves. Everybody loves Anton Frondel. He didn't need to carry Ugarden's J20. He just did it as a wing, and also could do it as a center iceman. But then he also played for Team Sweden, and he just put up phenomenal numbers, but just the way he looked at the U18 tournaments as a draft -1. So those are my big 3. But then you have Misa, who was, exceptional status, which is always a big deal, playing for Saginaw in the OHL. People are going to point towards the fact that he had a point regression this year. So in his draft -2, his 15, 16-year-old season, he was a point-a-game guy. I think he was over a point-a-game guy for Saginaw. But because Saginaw was hosting the Memorial Cup, they had to go and they had to bring in more talent. So I think that ate into his ice time and his opportunity. So you saw a statistical, I think, a slight regression. And that is why stat watchers and people are like, oh, he's going to slip in the rankings. But you have to factor in that with the graduations and the guys that are going to leave Saginaw now to play in the NHL, the AHL, because they're not hosting the Memorial Cup anymore, that it's going to be Misa's team. And he's going to be able to, do whatever he wants. So those are the big 4, in my opinion. But then you got other guys that you cannot sleep on. 3 of them are Swedes. One of them is Victor Eklund, who was William Eklund's younger brother. William Eklund was a top 10 pick of San Jose. He's going to be in the NHL next season. He's a very fun, exciting player. Well, Victor was a mainstay like Frondel, also Djurgårdens, played also in all those U18 tournaments. It was one of the best plays. Every tournament I watched, he was the best plays there, but also in the J20 was a top player for his team. And he was so dominant at the J20 level that the Allsvenskan team, they're trying, Djurgårdens is dying to get back into the SHL. They got relegated and they've been stuck there for about 3 years. they promoted Linus Eriksson and Victor Eklund, two J20 kids, one of them a draft -1, to play on the third line in the playoffs, all the way up until the Allsvenskan finals, where do or die. I mean, it's basically, Final Four or March May or Super Bowl, call it whatever you want for the Allsvenskan. I mean, you watch Ted Lasso, the freaking getting relegated is horrible.
Oh,
in
huge
European
deal.
sports. Yeah. So to get out of it, it means the world. And poor Ugandans, they can't get out of it. Unfortunately, they played Brinish, and Brinish had Clara, the goalie for Anaheim, the Italian kid, Northern Italian kid, Clara, 19 years old. He stopped everything. But that third line with Eriksson and Eklund together, they were fantastic. They were scoring. They were dangerous. So I think that's going to help him, even though he doesn't have the size, 5'10", 5'9". Then the other two Swedish kids is Viggo Nordlund, who wasn't as, I guess, prominent as Eklund statistically at some of these tournaments, but he looked prominent, and he ended up leading the J20 National in playoff scoring for Skellefteå, who won the whole thing. And they beat Örebro J20, which was a wagon scoring 7 goals a game. They played Skellefteå, and Skellefteå basically freaking smothered them. So Viggo Nordlund is a smaller winger like Eklund, who just puts up a lot of points, dynamic, fun, exciting. You want to call him like a Jonathan Berggren because of Berggren's, but I think the ceiling is higher. The last Swedish kid is Jacob Ice Wozniak. He's a bigger winger, lanky, but think Leo Carlson through and through. A good skater. He played for the Luleå program, and they're always like a defensive-oriented team. They entrusted this kid with the top line, and they were a playoff team. They were one of the best teams in the J20. They got upset by, I think, Örebro in the first round. By the way, Ice Wozniak, he too lit up the tournament circuit, scoring off the rush, scoring all types of goals. He was quiet, though, in the U18 world, so people might bring that up. I don't think it was a big deal. He was so phenomenal in the league play that, so that to me, those kids I mentioned, right, there's a couple of more where these kids should round out my top 10. The kids from Canada, right? So I'll start with Porter Martone. What a U18 tournament he had, but also with Mississauga. So he's a power forward. I think his dad was a hockey player who played Major Junior. I think he played Major Junior. But he is a leader through captain type, good size, but he does everything. And look at the scoring that he did at the U18 Worlds. He had something like over 2 points a game.
17 points in 7 games.
What do you have?
17 points in 7 games. 5
yeah,
points,
okay.
That's crazy.
That's phenomenal. But the other kid who I think might be better, and I actually posted the poll on Twitter, is the Malcolm Spence. He might be one of the most complete 200-foot wingers I've seen in a draft eligible, maybe. Where he plays for Erie. So here's the other thing about Erie, where I mentioned Schaefer. Schaefer was the first overall pick in his OHL draft, and Spence was the second overall pick, I believe.
Okay.
I think might have been behind Misa.
So that makes a lot of sense then.
So Martone, Spence, Schaefer, they're all very high OHL priority picks, and they've lived up to the expectations. So good luck finding anybody for me to squeeze into that. I
got one guy that you didn't mention, McQueen.
Okay, so he was the third guy I was going to mention, right?
Okay, I'm sorry,
Brandon Weekings, right? I think. Okay, so McQueen, Martone, Spence, the 4 Swedes, Hagens, and then Ryabkin. Maybe I could put Schaefer in there. Maybe you want to put Logan Hensler as a defenseman, because Logan Hensler is like a potential Zach Werenski, right? Big, long, gliding, offensive-minded defenseman. But everywhere else, though, like Finland doesn't really have as much oomph in their class this year. I got to dig into it a little bit deeper. But as of right now, let's talk about the NTDP for a second. So guys like Cole McKinney, center, right? I think he's out of Illinois, might be going to Michigan. And then Will Moore is another one. I think he's going to Boston College. They're both centers. I think Moore's a center, but the U17, here's the thing about the NTDP. this year's version of the U18. So basically the 2007 year group, they did not play well at any of the tournaments, and that their goals against was one of the higher goals against averages the program has ever had. They lost a lot of games lopsided. Now when I watched the U17s that had the Coolies and the Gautiers, when I watched the U17s that had the Turcottes and the Hugheses and the Zegrases, they were a wagon. They could have went and beat college teams. So keep an eye on the NTDP this year in two events, right? Well, not just the tournaments, but see how they play against USHL competition, of course, but also see if they beat good college teams or at least hang with the good college teams, because every NTDP usually does that. I don't know if this one's going to do it. They at the World U17 Challenge, the Canadian teams had their way with them. It's usually the other way around. So now they're doing this NTDP CHL Challenge, which is great for hockey. It's basically replacing the Russia Super Series in November. So no more CHL Top Prospects game, by the way. I think they got rid of that. So you're going to see the NTDP and play against the CHL Elite. I think it's going to be a 2-game series too. So you'll see like draft eligibles. Maybe it's going to be not draft eligible. I don't know if they'll do that to them, but goaltending too is there's a couple of goalies too. The Love Harenstam kid stands out the most, but then the Canadian goalies. I'm drawing a blank. Jack something. But anyway, it's going to be a better goalie class, I think, this year than next year than this year, but not as good as, let's say, 2023. 2023 was a really good year. So for the Flyers, you have the 3 first-round picks. Remember that if I'm correct, they have the Columbus pick no matter what, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that could be a high second. So now you're looking at potential, and if the Flyers are bad and they have their second, you're looking at 5 potential, let's say, top 40 picks.
Yeah, which is crazy to think. And
so
then
this is the kind of draft to do that.
And then with those let's say you do have those 5 top 40 picks. I mean, it's possible too that they really try to trade up and leverage that. So there's a lot they could do with the strategy, but it seems like you were saying, Steve, like the forward class is kind of loaded for 2025.
For the teams, like I haven't dug into it deep enough yet to gauge the overall strength. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because last year's top 10, when I'm looking at Celebrini, I'm looking at Yzerman, my preseason top 10. When I'm looking at those names, when I'm looking at Demidov, when I'm looking at Hellenius, when I'm looking at Catton,
also looked like it was stacked too.
I was like, wow, this is pretty good. So a lot of things can change. Will we see a lot of these kids play at the World Juniors? That'll be might be a telltale sign, especially for Canada. If Canada's like, well, wait a minute, we lost the World Juniors. We had a terrible showing this past year. We had Celebrini, but not a whole lot else. Maybe because the U18 Canadians, led by mostly draft -1s and Gavin McKenna, maybe this year's World Junior team will be on the younger side, and it's in Canada. So maybe that's Team Canada's way. And I hope they don't know, like, we have to wait and bring the high round picks. We want them there because you want to see Catton there. You want to see, obviously, Tijagindla, etc. All those defensemen. But Martone, McKenna, he's next year's draft. Spence, McQueen, Misa. We might see potentially 4 Canadian first-year eligibles at the World Juniors, and we haven't seen that since 2020, right? When they had Lafreniere, they had Byfield, they had Dawson Mercer, and who am I forgetting? Maybe Cole, Jamie Drysdale. There you go. So we could see a repeat of that 2020, and I think they won it all in 2020 if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they did. So
yeah, it's get excited if you're a Flyers fan but the question is, are they going to be picking late lottery, mid first? Are they going to make the playoffs? Like whatever. But let's try to get into Danny Briere's mind. And
I think if they're like mid first round, similar to where they were this year, Steve, like they're definitely going to try to move up big time. With all
good luck getting a team to agree with that, though.
That's true. Yeah.
Maybe ownership has said, hey, maybe again, this is all speculation, but this is what you have to think. At least consider. Maybe that Torch is like, I've done my part. I've established a good culture. That this year is the last year of the rebuild, specifically to get a high-end talent in 2025, because I don't think that the fans would stand for like 2 more years, even though you miss out on McKenna, that maybe the plan is if they're going to identify, if they don't get it off to a good start and they struggle, you're going to see a tear down, young kids playing, basically all Lehigh Valley with the intent to freaking target one of these elite players at the top.
I think we might see that, to be honest
Yeah,
with you. Just
possible,
the way that they've
yeah.
approached free agency. And
Torts will never let it happen on his watch, though. It'll have to be a natural progression of things or a regression.
Yeah, no, I think the removing of the veterans would naturally allow that to happen and would allow them to amass extra assets in this draft.
Yeah.
Potentially, if teams are willing to move assets from this draft. We do have, you know, at least Scott Lawton that can probably net some kind of nice return. But, you know, I see a guy like McQueen and I'm like, that's got Flyers name all over it. 6'5", power forward center. You know, the amount of guys that you're talking about and then combining that with Brent Flair and saying that this is a very strong draft. I just know that they are eyeing a few of these guys.
Seems like they've been targeting this draft specifically with all the picks.
I think every team, and that's why what was surprising with what Edmonton did.
Right. I think that's why the Flyers jumped on it.
I'm not going to put next year's draft on 2023's level, where you had a consensus top 5, or well, it should have been top 5 with friggin' Michkov, but you had that feel forward heavy for what, like months, and the kids did nothing wrong the whole year round. Nobody could sharpshoot them except Michkov because he was Russian, but everybody else, you know, I mean, and so we might see that though. I don't know if it's possible though for Hagens to fall out, because
probably not.
If Perreault and Leonard go back to Boston College, and I don't know, every day things can change. He's essentially replacing Will Smith with 2 of the best 5'4" wingers in college. So why would he not just repeat what he did with the NTDP and put up? And again, you heard it from me. I'm sure you heard from other people. He might surpass Celebrini's scoring, and maybe even Eichel's scoring, and maybe Fantilli's scoring.
Crazy.
Because if you got 35 goal wingers, right? I mean, it's a short schedule, but you could see that with Hagens. I mean, he's a Long Island kid, so you know I'm going to be pulling for him. He's a New Yorker, but he's just he's a great player. I mean, 200 foot. You know, there'll be Celebrini comparisons, but I think he's kind of unique in everything that he does.
Definitely highlight reel, like in terms of the skill there. So.
Oh man, I mean his vision, the way he places the puck, and if you're a Flyers fan, it's one of those things where, you know, you're out of the race by mid to late November. Turn the TV off and, you know, start following the draft, because I'm looking forward to covering these kids. But the Swedish kids, listen, the Swedish kids might get underrated. You might see guys who that ranked 20th, whatever. Don't listen to that. I'm telling you, I don't care about their size. Those kids did everything in their power to stand out. So Central Scouting could rank them low. I am not ranking them low. My ranking should come out within the next 48 hours, a top 32. So
you're a machine, Steve.
Well, I mean, listen, this I clearly I enjoy it. So, but yeah, I think that the last podcast I was a little critical, somewhat critical of the Flyers not telling me. They're not telling me where they're going. Now I know where they're going. I have an idea. So I would agree if a teardown is in the future, and yeah, it sucks after the fun that we had last year, but look at the rest of the conference. Look at the rest of the teams, like loading up.
Look at all the picks they have too, so it just makes sense. Like, okay, 2025, it looks like they've been planning for this for a little bit here.
I think they have been, and I think the cap aligns with that too, because if they can walk away with big wins in this upcoming draft,
all that dead money comes off, Yariv.
Or at least half of it, or more than half of it comes off, and then the cap will go up again, and then maybe they take that one more year to slowly redefine themselves, and then it's that following year I think is going to be their big like coming out party after Michkov's
maybe free agency moves, stuff like that.
Yeah. So let's talk about free agency a little bit, because the Flyers kind of made all their moves. We talk about the re-signings. They made one signing so far in free agency, and it's an AHL forward and Anthony Richard. Former former fourth round pick. Seems to be like an AHL All-Star.
Good
He
replacement
was with
for
the Nashville
Lazinski.
organization. He was a 2015 pick. Richard. He was a Quebec
Oh,
League.
it's Richard. Okay.
I'm pretty sure he was a Nashville, Milwaukee guy for a while.
Yeah, and he was playing for Providence last season.
Okay, so yeah, I mean,
some NHL experience, but he
LaPierre's gonna love him. LaPierre's gonna be like, I wish my prospects played more like Anthony Richard.
Well, that and honestly, he was brought in to replace Tanner Lazinski, who yeah. So he's most likely going to be playing that role. I don't really anticipate he's going to be playing with the Flyers at all this year. But that's the only addition they made. And I saw people complaining that like, are the Flyers really going to run it back? Yeah,
Daniel Briere literally said though, like in the pre-draft presser, he said, "I don't expect to do much in free agency."
Yeah.
Then in the after round 1, when we interviewed him, he said, "I don't expect to do much in free agency." Then after round 2, or round 2 to 7, when we interviewed him, he said, "I don't expect to do much in free agency." So he's been telling everybody they're not going to do much in free agency.
It makes complete sense. It makes
with where they're going. Why would you, right?
Not just that, but also that free agents will go to a team to either do one of two things: to win or to make money.
Exactly.
The Flyers are not in a position to do either.
Either one.
They're not in a position to win. They're not in a position to give you a lot of money. So why would you go there? Yeah, Philly's a great city. The organization's first class. Everything, it checks a lot of blocks. You know, like from the family standpoint, the Philly area is a very easy sell to have free agents come in. Philly's never had a problem bringing in free agents, right? But think about like where the Flyers are going to be, where they see themselves in, let's say, 3 or 4 years. You like Fletcher tried that, okay, with the extensions and the big signings, and did not work. And there's no way they hired Briere and Jones to be like, continue it a little. Like I said, the only way that would happen is if the ownership said, "I'm putting my foot down. You're doing what I tell you. I don't care," and execute. But that's not going to happen. So
I don't think so either.
Yeah, I mean, you know, teams that are cash strapped, that are contenders, that's totally fine if they were quiet. But with the Flyers, they have again. But again, if they miss the playoffs and they come close again, if they're not active at the deadline, but they have a good season, the fans have a right to be upset. They do have a right to be like, come on, what the hell? Like, you're right there. You have all these picks, prospects. Do something. You know what I mean? It wouldn't kill you to just add a rental. You know what I mean? And so
I agree with you. I think that would be the attitude, regardless of what the overall plan, because we saw it this year where people were like, you know, oh, come on. Like they wanted to trade Sean Walker, but they also wanted the team to grab somebody else, right? And they were upset about Eric Johnson being the only real pickup that they had. But I think the Flyers are going to do what they did this year. If they are close to the playoff spot, they will move whatever prized asset they have, try to get another high pick, try to get 4 first-round picks, which would be wild, and just let it roll. And I think if they end up at the bottom of the league, like you said, I think they'll have not like a complete fire sale, but I do think guys like Scott Lawton will be probably on their way out. Like guys who they recognize they can get value for. I think they'll look to do that. If they're near the playoffs, they'll probably keep Lawton for another year. But I think with the names available, the amount of assets, and the fact that the Capitals were highly aggressive and made their team better this year. The New Jersey Devils underperformed and also made their team better this year, and they will have a healthy Dougie Hamilton. Even Columbus should do better this year, even though I still don't think they'll be good. Right. These teams are looking to improve, and the Flyers are stagnant. So I think there's a good chance that the Flyers, even if they repeat their performance from this year, still will even drop further to not the 12th pick, you know, maybe somewhere around 8, 7, something like that. And then that does give you an opportunity to grab one of these top guys. And then maybe they don't even have to trade any of their assets and they just draft a bunch of first round picks in what they identify as a very strong draft, as we heard Brent Flair already say. And I suspect that if you add 4 first round picks, you know, and 2, I'm just guessing here, and then 3 second round picks, you filled your pool over the past few years. Your draft pool is completely full. Your cap is now open. And then that following year, you can maybe attract, and with the addition of Michkov, which is a big name, and assuming he does well, that might tempt a free agent to come over here, to look at the growing, to look at the prospect pool, to look at the cap space, like you said, and maybe they can identify it because the free agency pool wasn't that deep this year.
No. It was good though, but it
was good, but it wasn't like
there was
nobody really made it available that was high end.
It went.
I will say with free
codes.
agency, like there was a lot of movement where like a lot of guys did move around, so it made it interesting just to see like who's on what team and how they're going to fit in and things like that. Like for me, I mean, obviously Washington was huge, right? Like they first of all they
pull off that trade.
Yeah, it was a good trade for Chychrun, that's for sure. I mean, they get Mangiapane in there. I like that move. I like them getting it Logan Thompson because, I mean, you add that to Lindgren. That's a pretty solid goaltending, depth there. And then they do the Chychrun trade. They signed
Dubois. They
got Dubois as well. We forgot about. They signed Matt Waugh. So they're really trying to help Ovechkin out, obviously, his last couple of years and kind of get more competitive. So that's going to be interesting. And then the Predators, I mean, I think they like went all out, right? Obviously, getting Stamkos, getting Marchessault, William Carrier as well, Brady Shea, like so crazy.
Forgot crazy about stuff. Brady. They gave him a huge deal.
Yeah, huge contract.
What's weird though about Nashville's situation is that they have a top like 5, in my opinion, prospect pool, and they extended Saros, and then they get another goal.
Askarov's in the rear view.
Is going to be back in Milwaukee again, where he's one of the best goalies in the league. But here's what I always say every year. Same thing in the NFL. Basically, that winning the offseason is fine, but at the end of the day, only 8 teams win a playoff round, and only 4 teams win 2. So if you miss the playoffs or only win one round, unless you're like a rebuilder, your season was a failure. All right. I mean, contenders lose. And again, unless you've like improved, still, we have to be realistic. Nobody's going to remember a team who improved 10 points of the standing but missed the playoffs. Okay. You remember the teams that go to the conference finals. Exactly. Remember the teams that go to the Stanley Cup finals, win the division, President's Trophy, etc. So, like this is the arms race. We see this happen quite often, not just at the deadline, but also at free agency. And all the teams, they all fit the same profile, right? Teams who were disappointed with their finish last year, underperformers, the Devils, Buffalo, Ottawa, underperformers. Detroit, not that busy because they've been improving every year. So last year was like a high watermark for them. Since they last made the playoffs, whereas Chicago has been going down. They had no choice. They had to go out and spend a lot of money. Yeah, Columbus, enough. We got a new GM. We got Waddell. We got, enough is enough. We underperformed. Someone's going to, a lot of teams are going to lose out. They're not going to be good next year. They just spent a ton of money, and there's going to be 3 or 4 teams that just screwed their cap over because it did not work. And we'll wait to see how it turns out. But as a Ranger fan, I am glad they haven't done anything and that the only talk is getting rid of frickin' Trouba. So, with the Flyers too, I was going to tweet it out and then I was busy. But that completely smart on Briere's part to not make a move.
Don't tie up any cap space because you're really going to be competitive in the future here. So
yeah, and you want to have flexibility when you start to improve. You want to lock up your key guys. You don't want to become like Chicago and LA and to a degree Washington and soon Pittsburgh, where you just kept on going and going. And yeah, you might have won, but I think there's a way to do it in the cap world without screwing yourself. That if you're going to give NMCs and NTCs, give it to your own homegrown guys who earned it, not the freaking, UFAs who, some teams get lucky with that, but
that usually, if you look at history, right, like most free agents get overpaid. That's why it's the free agent market, right? They're trying to kind of use other teams against each other, get the leverage. Another couple teams I just want to mention some signings, like the Blackhawks, like you said, Steve did a ton, like signed Tyler Bertuzzi, TJ Brody, Laurent Brossoit, Alec Martinez, Pat Maroon, Craig Smith, Teuvo Teravainen. So Yeah, so
outside of Tuvo, I mean, that Martinez is like 37 years old.
I know. So they're trying to add some, vet guys, I guess, more vet guys around Bedard, but they should really be getting younger.
They're still going to be a bad. They're still going to be a bad team.
Davidson is under a lot. I'm sorry to interrupt, Vasili, but Davidson's under a lot of pressure because the fans are fed up, and like I said, they've gotten worse every year in the last 5 years. So if you watch all the interviews with him in local TV and radio, they're all like, "Hey, dude, you're gonna like start buying?" He's like, "Oh, well, we're still in the process of the rebuild." Dude, their rebuild started in 2018.
Yeah, it's been a while at this point.
Started. So
really, Bedard's been the highlight. But other than that,
that's it. I mean, they had a couple of young pieces, but this was to placate, like to keep people at bay. But yeah, it's gonna probably get.
Well, that's why I don't think it'll last that long here in Philly, and that's why I think their patience. And I got mocked for saying patience. Oh, we haven't had a championship. I'm like, yeah, that's irrelevant to me that you're impatient. But like the reality is that the Flyers have laid out a plan for you. If you're really paying attention, they have laid out a plan, and maybe in that time they'll be able to be aggressive. And I actually think it's good for the Flyers that the Metro teams went aggressive. Good. Get yourselves in cap hell. Good. Absolutely. Do that. Well, you can have it this year and just wait a year or two and we'll be back. Like, I think that's kind of the attitude that they're kind of approaching with this. Like, let the other teams get into that. And I don't know if Leon Draisaitl will actually become a UFA and go to market. I know there's rumors about it. I rarely believe that it actually happens. Typically,
Tavares did it. Tavares was coming off of not far removed from a Hart Trophy finalist season.
But that's a player to if you have
save
a bunch
the
of
cap space for.
Right, exactly, and that could align with the Flyers window too. I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen, but
you never know.
Maybe wait until there's an actual UFA market with a franchise player in it, and that's where you be like, now we're done rebuilding. We went out. I'm just saying, got Leon Draisaitl. We filled our prospect pool. We have Michkov. We have these younger guys. We have Bonk. We have York, who's in his mid-20s, and Dries. Like, I think that's how you kind of do it, is like you build all the core around it. And then when you see that corner piece out there, that veteran corner piece, you go out and get him. Yeah. And then you kind of, you already bring him onto a good team. You don't bring him onto a bad team and hope that you're not a bottom feeder anymore.
No, it's definitely true though. Like how many teams do you see build it through free agency specifically and have success? It's very rare, right? You got to have those high-end pieces from the draft usually first, and then there's always sometimes you're never
St. Louis.
Yeah, St. Louis, but there's always times too, right? Like you got to have those draft pieces. You got to have those guys that, okay, they're good players in your system maybe, but you might have to trade some of them to get guys that might fit better. So it's all a culmination of all of it, right? Through the draft, through some trades, through free agency. And just to end, I want to mention just a couple more guys that I thought were interesting signings. Edmonton gets Jeff Skinner on 1 year, $3 million. I thought that was
buyout fun. Is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. Sorry.
It is crazy, yeah, but it's good for him to go to Edmonton. They signed Arvidsson as well. I think that'll be pretty solid for them. Skinner and Arvidsson as depth. And then I like what the Leafs kind of did with their defense. I mean, I don't mind them getting Ekman Larson and Tanev. I think who else did they get?
They got Stolars.
Yeah, Stolars as well. That's why I thought that was interesting too.
They re-upped Domi and Liljegren.
Yeah. I thought Stolars was interesting. I think Stolars might be poised to be a starter, but we'll see here.
Well, he was interviewed and he said that it was a good question that someone asked him. It might have been James Duthie, where he was like, did you go there knowing that that Joseph Woll is still young and he was like, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to hide from the fact that there's an opportunity for me to be the number one, but I
think it seems like a 50-50 split. To
whoever plays better, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the fact is that they've addressed the defense in the past, but it was a personnel issue.
Yeah.
By getting Tanev, I think OEL, he was really, really insulated on that Florida team. But,
yeah, exactly.
But still, like Boston made major freaking acquisition, 2 major acquisitions.
Yeah, they're going to be good. They're going to be good.
Yeah. So
Lindholm especially
that, and then Tampa Bay now is like fed up losing the first round. So now and Florida's still Florida. So that Atlantic, I say it every year, is going to be a bloodbath. As far as our Metro goes, I think there's going to be some pretenders exposed early. Not necessarily teams that didn't make it last year. One of these teams, like Pittsburgh, Washington, the Islanders, they have to fall back.
What's Pittsburgh doing, right? Like, I have no idea.
I will say this. I do think there's a chance that if John Tortorella does what he does and the young players on this team progress, there is a chance that the Flyers do repeat what they did this year and fight for that wild card spot. And imagine investing all this money and then having the Flyers, who invested nothing, take that spot from you.
The power play has to.
They won't make it with that bottom power play.
They can't what 3 years. They can't with that horrible power.
Let me ask you this, Steve, because you're the most experienced watching him. Do you think that Michkov can be an instant impact on the Flyers power play?
It's going to take a lot of practice because he feeds off of. He's not a one-man show.
Yeah.
The thing about Michkov, and we all know this, is that when he has the puck behind the net, so the Flyers might have to change their power play strategy if they don't.
Oh man!
If they don't employ the working from the boards out. I don't know what the technical doctrinal term is, industry term.
Yeah.
Where you basically you flip your power play where the points become behind the net, and you make the defensemen, everybody face the board, so it exposes so they're not, you don't have anybody facing forward. Michkov is like a master at manipulating that.
So, I hope you're right, Steve, because I've been telling this to Yariv on this podcast for years. I'm like, the Flyers power play is so bad. Why have they never tried to run it from behind the net? And I'm hoping with Michkov, they actually do that. And it's just somebody who's played goalie his whole life. Like me as a goalie, what did I fucking hate? And the teams ran the power play from behind the net because you don't know
the Michkov Michigan ain't going away. Like, I don't know, Don Cherry, whoever could complain about hot dogging, whatever, it works. It's a known tactic. It's a proven tactic that works. So just the threat of Michkov being able to pull off a Michigan could really, and we all know that he's a dynamic playmaker, that his vision, his passing is phenomenal, and that he can exploit like overzealous defensemen who will fixate on him. And remember that, Brink and Frost and Tippett, and these are skilled guys.
That's
like
what I mean.
Drysdale.
If they can find them.
So if they could somehow get the chemistry, the thing about Michkov though is he doesn't stay in one place. He likes to circle and weave, and
that's our power play.
Alternate sides. The one thing, and I can't tell you why the power play struggles with Philly, because if it's like missed opportunities, lack of shooting, Michkov is very fine with his shots. Like, and I said this, I think, a long time ago, one of the first podcasts that I did with you guys, was that slipping into openings, no one can do it better.
Finds that open ice, yeah.
So I think if he could score a couple of goals early, you want the narrative for the other team to be, all right, before we start, let's talk about Michkov and how we're going to stop him. And that is why you draft him. That is why, because then you allow teams will have to let their guard down. And this isn't guaranteed to work, because look at Pittsburgh's power play. Watch Carlson, watch Crosby, watch Malkin. They stunk. We were terrible. We're the worst in the league. So, but like you said, Vasili, just try anything.
Might as well. It's the worst in the last 3 years straight. So you may as well try. But I think to your point, Steve, like if it does improve, it's going to be probably through Michkov, Drysdale, and then Forster, because the kid has a rip of a shot. So him and Tippett together there. But
I mean, Tort's power plays, I hate to say this, they've never been good. He's never really ran, unless you look at an outlier in his Tampa years.
Yeah, Tampa. But think about that. It's all LeCavalier, St. Louis, and Richards. So
that's what I'm saying. So maybe Torts, we love Torts, but sometimes, when it comes to the power play, he's got to answer up to it. I know the media might be intimidated or whatever, but he's got it. Dude, you're the coach. You can't say, "Oh, it's not my problem." No, it is your problem. You're the coach. Why does it stink? It's been the worst 2 power plays in the franchise history. The five power play was always known to be dangerous one way or another. Middle of the pack at worst, maybe in the 20s, but historically bad back-to-back years, and with Torts as head coach,
crazy.
It's not a coincidence. So whatever he's doing, it's not working. So
Yeah.
I like that Briere and Jones might have been like, all right, you know what? If you can't fix it, we'll fix it for you by getting you personnel. If it still stinks with all this talent on there, you might have to consider getting rid of Tortorella. Because again, the power play prevented the Flyers from making the playoffs last year.
I believe he has a 4-year deal. I could see him finishing out that deal, but I wouldn't be surprised if eventually
if the power play stinks, like he can't be like in this ivory tower because he's the mean, angry guy that intimidates the press. Well, he's got to answer up to it. It's a terrible, terrible thing to have. No coach should be proud of that. When your power play is the worst power play in the league,
it's a negative. It's
100% negative. I mean, like Steve said, it stopped the Flyers from really making the playoffs. I mean, I think I'm still surprised they kept Rocky Thompson on as the power play coach. That's pretty crazy. Apparently, they're going to go by a group by committee power play style and have a bunch of guys weigh in, like a Patrick Sharp, John LeClaire. I mean, we'll see how that works. Danny Heatley, we'll see how that committee coaching works. But yeah, that'll be something to watch for the Flyers next year for sure.
And it was a mess. Watching it was a mess too. So
yeah.
It's got to be fixed. All right. We've gone very long on this one. We hit 3.5 hours.
That's okay. It was fun.
I think it ties our longest one with Steve, which, it's awesome. It's great content.
Thank you, guys.
And I didn't have to pee during this one, which was great. All right. Vasili, anything you want to leave our audience with?
No, just thanks to everybody who followed our site for all the draft content, listen into all our videos for all the draft content, followed me along on Twitter as well for the draft content. Like, we appreciate that support.
You did a great job.
Oh, thanks, brother. I mean, without all the fans following along, helping us out, we wouldn't be able to do this stuff. So we appreciate you all.
Yeah.
And we appreciate Steve too for coming on all this time.
Yeah, Steve.
Always.
You were the man. Thank you so much for doing these marathon runs with us. Invaluable content, sincerely. Anything you want to leave our audience with?
Listen, if you're a Flyers fan and you're not subscribing to these guys and Isaiah, Chef, and Dan with O&B, you're nuts. Because really, I have to follow the Flyers because I want to be prepared when I'm on the show. But at the same time, I have to follow the Flyers because I've been doing this since I was a kid. When I used to play Stratomatic, and I always used Peter Zezel and Pelle Eklund and Brian Propp and Tim Kerr and go down the list. So it's weird because I'm a rich and it made me very sad many times. But the content is phenomenal. You guys cover everything. I mean, the social media piece, the written piece. So it's great stuff. So if you are a Flyers fan, you guys are nuts if you don't give these guys a follow and just take it all in. And, that's pretty much it. So for me, I'm not going on vacation. I told my wife and my girls I'm going on vacation. I am not going on vacation. I'm going to finish up my 2025 rankings and then get right into prepping my watch list and getting ready for the WJSS this year. We're going to see some draft eligibles playing in that. You're probably going to see some of the Swedish kids in the Hagens. I think Hagens was invited. That's in late July, and that's it. Substack, the draftanalyst.substack.com, free and subscribe content. And that's pretty much it. So a good year in the books. It was a good year.
Yeah, it was great. I can't wait to read your coverage. I'm definitely going to be following the draft early this year.
Same here.
With all the first round picks.
Yeah, I'm going to be less NHL involved, because the NHL really made me upset this year. Just a lot of stuff. But anyway, no, it's going to be everything prospects and draft. And in doing that, you also get to watch some of the prospects who have already been drafted playing in Europe and college. So I'll be able to get feedback on that too. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm always excited. You take a couple of weeks off or whatever, but I'm not going to take any time off. I'm just going to go right into it.
I love it. And we'll look forward to that. And, again, thank you, Steve. Really, really appreciate you coming on.
Problem.
Again, just want to remind everybody about our sponsors. Jim Steaks, 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's on 4th and South. Also, Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for all your insurance adjustment needs. Again, that's Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Want to remind everybody to please hit that the subscribe button as well. If you made it this far and you have not subscribed yet, what are you doing? Please subscribe to the podcast. Hit the bell for notifications when we release our episodes. Follow us on iTunes and on Spotify, and give us a rating there as well. And also a shout out to Sports Spider. Again, you can go to Sports Spider to get all your aggregate sports needs. Again, if you are on the Flyers portion of their site, you will see our stuff pinned at the top. We built a partnership with them, so make sure to go check out Sports Spider. And again, thank you everybody for listening. We love you, and remember, always stay green.